Let me.
So Tom, Vicky's having a little bit of trouble getting in. Sounds like she's getting a message saying that the meeting is not yet started.
I wonder if she's got the wrong code. If she's using the code for the.
Okay,
There we go.
I'm
So we have Vicky and Rich. I'm not seeing Tanya, and I'm not seeing Myra yet.
It might be the same issue. I was using that link and couldn't get in. I don't know. Technical difficulties.
Well, we have real capable people in the back room helping electronically.
We're all here, Mr. Mayor.
I see Vicky, Anna. I don't see Myra.
I see her on my list.
Oh, as a participant?
There she is.
Sorry, I'm here.
Thank you, Myra. Now, let's see. Okay, we are all here. Thank you. Well, good evening, everyone. It is now 6 o'clock, and this is the April 6th, 2021 meeting of the Woodland City Council now commencing. And it is being conducted according to the executive order of the governor, which allows us to meet electronically during the COVID crisis. We welcome participation from the public, and there's different ways to do it. You'll find them identified at the head of our agenda for this evening's meeting. You can find that at the city's website, www.cityofwoodland.org. So if you have an interest in participating tonight, please check out the agenda and find out how you can participate. With that, I would like to indicate that we have just returned from closed session, and I would like our counsel, Ethan Walsh, to describe the action taken during closed session. Mr. Walsh.
Thank you, Mayor. We did have a closed session on existing litigation that's been filed against the city by Nancy Lee, Eric Paulson, and the Yolo County Farm Bureau, challenging the city's decision to approve the Woodland Flood Risk Management project. And the council unanimously authorized my office to defend the city in the lawsuit. And that is the only reportable action from closed session.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. We will then proceed now that I've called the meeting to order, to a roll call. And we'll ask our clerk, Ana Gonzalez, to call the roll, please.
Thank you, Mayor Stallard. Mayor Pro Tem Vega.
Aye. Present, sorry.
Councilmember Fernandez.
present.
Councilmember Garcia Cadena.
Present.
Councilmember Landsberg.
Present.
Mayor Stallard.
Present.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Anna. And that will allow us to move along to the Pledge of Allegiance. And I'd like to ask our Assistant City Manager, Christine Engel, to lead us in the pledge this evening. Christine, are you there?
I am, thank you.
Let's all stand. Thank you.
Yes, let's begin. I pledge allegiance
To the
flag of the United States of America,
And to the republic for which it stands.
for which it stands, one
a
nation.
nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. It's really difficult with all the echoes and cutting in and cutting out to lead the pledge, but it's important that we do it. And we now can move to communications and public comment. Is there any member of the public that wishes to address the council this evening? Madam Clerk, do you have any such indications?
I don't have anyone in the public, no.
All right.
But
There
I
being,
have a voicemail.
you have a voicemail?
Yes, and our IT staff, Jay Camara, will be playing that back.
All right, well, we'll just stand by for a
My
moment.
name is Lisa Yep-Salinas. I live in Woodland. I want to thank the City Council for passing the resolution for equal treatment of Asian American and Pacific Islanders. I'm very concerned because it was Tuesday, about 2 weeks ago, that, excuse me, not Tuesday, but it was Thursday, that the Woodland Police Department put out a community alert because there was a man that stalked a woman on California Avenue who is of Asian descent, and he told her that he was going to hunt and kill Chinese. I don't think that man was apprehended, but it brings to light the danger that is lurking around Woodland and Yolo County. And I was hoping that the Woodland City Council could make a motion at the next meeting to widely publicize the resolution for equal treatment of Asian American Pacific Islanders. Some potential ideas are putting it on the website, all the city buildings. We know that there's electronic signages on electronic billboards off of 102, and I think near the County Fair Mall, as well as passing on information to all the city employees with information where to call the police and the FBI to report if you're a victim or a witness for a hate crime against Asian American Pacific Islanders. And if we want to decide to put it into the city's utility bills as an insert, and then perhaps at all of our signages we have for COVID-19. In this way, we can help people understand the resolution and the gravity of the matter and how to report any incidences if they are a victim or that they witness. We may also consider communication to the business community in the downtown area to help the businesses in case racial hate happens in their business or to their employees, or if they are graffitied or damaged. Thank you for this consideration, and thank you for being a bright light for cities across the nation in regards to the rise of hatred and violence against the Asian American Pacific Islanders. And we appreciate you coming in strong so that no more people will be hunted or killed because they are Asian American. I'm happy to be a resource for you, and again, my name is Lisa Yep-Salinas. I've done this kind of work at a corporate setting, but I would happy to help out as a volunteer to keep Woodland safe as well as Yolo County. And I'm hoping that we will be able to organize and work with the different cities within Yolo County, and if there are cities that need help. You have inspired Sacramento City as well as Dublin City and other cities across the nation. Thank you so much for your consideration, your leadership, and your bravery.
Thank you, Lisa. Those were heartfelt words, we know. And I don't think we need to take action as a council. I think we just need to pass the staff your words, and between Ken Hyatt and our new communication specialist, we'll make sure we get that word out as widely as we can. Is that okay, Ken?
Absolutely.
All right. All right. Any additional public comment tonight on items not otherwise on the agenda?
No, none.
Thank you. That being the case, we'll move along to communications from the council and staff. And why don't we start with Rich Landsberg, Councilman Rich Landsberg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Very brief tonight. Besides my regular meetings that I attend on a regular basis, I did have the chance to attend the Yolo County Spring 2021 Leaders Summit with the theme of United Against Hate, where we heard from tremendous speakers from the Asian community regarding their feelings and their experience in our little city, in our county, about Asian hate. It's intolerable. And Lisa's timing is perfect. And I learned a lot. And we need to be united against this hate, not just for Asians, but for all peoples. So I joined the request to get the word out there as best we can. It's just not called for, and it's intolerable. It's also very illegal. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, one last thing. I forgot. On March 30th, I did attend the YouTube meeting of the Police Department's award ceremony, and I want to congratulate all the winners from last year. And they all did an exemplary job in their last year's performance. And the last thing is that we continue to work, Councilmember Garcia Cadena and I, on the 150th sesquicentennial celebration. And I think we're going to have a presentation at the next council meeting for the whole council. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Landsberg, and thank you for your leadership on the Woodland 150 committee, along with your colleague. All right, we'll move along now, and Council Member Vicky Fernandez, would you share with us your report?
Thank you, Mayor Stallard. Also, like Council Member Landsberg, I also attended the YED topic on March 24th with the county representatives and local elected officials. Also attended the 3x2x2 subcommittee on equity and diversity, and also had a 2x2 with Councilmember Garcia Cadena with our Chamber of Commerce. So I'd like to thank Mark Ulrich and Josh Hilliard for their time, and city staff for their input on how to help our local businesses through the pandemic and their upcoming events. They are hoping to have their golf tournament in May and continue hoping to have everything back to normal soon. Also attended through the California League of Cities, California Cities, they offered a White House briefing update on some of the resolutions or bills that have passed. So talking about the American Recovery Plan and the upcoming proposals by the White House. So it was an informative briefing for April 1st. And then I'm looking forward to attending the badge pinning for our local firefighters who have been hired with the Yolo County Woodland Fire Department, firefighter Steele and Zuniga. So looking forward to that activity coming up. So again, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Councilmember Fernandez. And now Councilmember Tanya Garcia Cadena.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to thank everyone who was involved with the planning of the Cesar Chavez event. I appreciate the effort that went into it. I know it was a little different than it's been in the past, and the turnout was a little bit lower than been in the past, which was actually part of the plan. But it was nice to have that celebration and see families out there, and I appreciate everyone that was involved. And then I also wanted to let the community know that North Valley Indian Health is offering COVID-19 vaccines to community members 16 years of age or older. You just go to their website, nvih.org, to register, and they are doing the vaccinations on Thursdays and Tuesdays. And they're really easy to get into. They're trying to do some outreach, and so I wanted to share that information. That's it.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Garcia Cadena. And that brings us to Mayor Pro Tem. And Mayor Pro Tem, are you ready for your report?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am. So in addition to my council assignment meetings that I attend, I had the pleasure of participating in the annual awards ceremony put on the police department. And I was just so proud and honored to be part of this great team. I loved hearing all the stories that were shared. Really want to say congratulations and thank you to all the women and men who serve our community day in and day out. I also attended the Cesar Chavez celebration at Heritage Plaza with my my daughter Teresa, and we really enjoyed planting the seeds of change. So I really, Christine, commend you and your team for putting on the event. It was nice to be out and hear music and meet some of your staff and hear some of the great stories that they've had with their distance learning programs. So I got the opportunity to talk with them and heard some of the great stories that have come out of that program. So thank you. And I do want to make a announcement to the community. I have had the pleasure of talking to some residents who were reporting some concerns and have been sharing our great tool that we have, our citizen reporter tool. It's on our website. If you have trouble finding it, shoot me an email or give me a call and I'll show you. It's a great way to report any hazards or anything that you see as you're out and about. I've noticed with the great weather, there's more folks out in the community. So we would love your support in reporting any issues that come up on your daily walk. So thank you. That'll be all, Mayor Steller. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Myra Vega. All right, that brings me to my report. I'd just like to initially mention that we still have vacancies to be filled on the boards and commissions for the city of Woodland, just about 10 of them. Applications are available at our city website. Send them in. We actually will be filling those positions as we move through the spring for being seated sometime beginning in June. So if you're interested in serving your city, take a look at what might be available. I know there's one opening on the Planning Commission, and we've just added a need for a Woodland representative on the Valley Clean Energy Citizens Advisory Committee. That would also start in June. So talk to any of us or fill out an application, please. In addition to the other normal responsibilities and the nice events that have been described by my colleagues, I've been participating on work regarding the Woodland Flood Project. It's so important to our community, and I participated in the Chamber Water Committee discussion where our water engineer, Tim Bush, presented. And I felt people are understanding the need and the virtues of the solution. We also had 2 visits with local groups of farmers to try to help them understand the city's position as well as to listen to them and hear their concerns. Second item I want to mention is that the state of the city will be given probably late June this year. I'm hoping we can do it at an outdoor venue like the Rotary Picnic Grounds, so that we can at least be live even if we're socially distanced and outdoors. Third item is business outreach is ongoing. Thanks to our economic development staff who were able to do Zoom calls with the CEOs of both Aquafil and Hygieia. Aquafil is a company that came here 2 years ago. It's an Italian company that recycles carpet fiber. They literally chew it all up and break it up into its constituent parts and recycle everything. It's a wonderful company. We're very proud to have them. The CEO of Aquafil is also open to developing a training program for maintenance engineers. They have $16 million worth of equipment on their plant floor, and they need competent people to take care of it. So they're working with Woodland Community College, going to be working with them to develop a training program on site. We also had a very productive discussion with the CEO of Hygieia. We've been with him a number of times over the years. It's a biotech company doing remarkable things, developing vaccines for animals, in particular cows. So proud to have both Aquafil and Hygieia in our community. I would also like to mention the concern for overcoming racial hate continues with YOLO leaders doing the program that you've already heard discussed. UC Davis Law School is doing a lecture series currently. I've been able to listen to some of them. And then the Sacramento Area Council of Governments, of which we are a part, has created a subcommittee to work on the subject of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And in considering how our transportation decisions affect all of us and to ensure that they're equitable as we all move forward. I also want to mention that there are 3 pillars at SACOG. They are economic expansion, connectivity, and making our region a great place to live. That 3rd pillar is the foundation of a new project whereby we are defining trails in our region and how we can connect them for bike and pedestrian use for both commuting and recreation. And if you didn't realize it, colleagues, We have a trail kind of in the making in Yolo County that would essentially go up Cache Creek, taking former gravel mining sites, which have been reclaimed for recreational purposes, and connecting them so that we'll have a nice system. And we have other opportunities in this county as well. But the idea of hooking up with trails all over the region is a pretty exciting possibility. I also want to thank Dino Gay, Kathy Harriman, and the Native Sons of the Golden West for putting on a celebration of local history in downtown Woodland on Saturday. We had probably a couple of hundred people out there enjoying aspects of our history. All right, I think that's probably enough for me, but I would like to conclude with my mayor's minute. At his inauguration in January of 1961, newly elected President John F. Kennedy famously declared, "Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country." Those words are just as important and relevant today as when he spoke them 60 years ago. I would challenge my fellow citizens and myself to apply those words to our city as well. Many of our citizens are already doing so much for others, but I would invite everyone blessed to live in Woodland to ask, what can I do for my city and my fellow citizens? One obvious thing all can do is to get vaccinated to help us continue the long road to putting COVID behind us. But there is so much more that needs to be done, and government cannot do, nor should it do, everything. When we invest time and energy in making our city a better place, we bless others, and we benefit ourselves by growing and feeling more connected to this special place. And now, Mr. Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Council members, great reports tonight. Only one addition to offer to those reports would be that I learned today that the library will be reopening on April 21st to the public again for the first time in over a year. So thank you to the library staff for doing a great job over the last year, transitioning programming, maintaining that service to the community, and they're now anxious to bring back the community into the library. The Makerspace will have appointments still available only for the classes through the Makerspace for a while, but the library itself will be open. So encourage folks to safely come back to the library and take advantage of those services. And then long range agenda real quick, the April 20th meeting coming up in 2 weeks. We'll have a couple of presentations for the council and the community. The first will be a presentation from Caltrans staff talking about Interstate 5 and a comprehensive multimodal corridor plan that they're launching into, which obviously greatly affects residents as well as businesses within our community that use I-5 on a regular basis to go east-west, north-south on I-5. So looking forward to hearing what Caltrans plans are to address the congestion, both short-term and long-term on that corridor. We'll also hear from Mitch Sears from Valley Clean Energy, talking about Valley Clean Energy's current state of affairs and initiatives moving forward to continue to leverage the asset that Valley Clean Energy offers to residents and businesses of our community. I'll also be working with the mayor to begin to frame some different approaches that might assist our community members to understand better and potentially even take advantage of some better pricing for some of our local businesses. And then we'll bring back for council discussion consideration the mayor pro tem rotation item that was initiated back in December. And then we'll conclude with an update on all the great work that the Woodland 150-year celebration committee has been working on, provide the council and the community some insight into all the great ideas that have come out of that committee and what we'll all be able to look forward to over the coming months to celebrate our 150th year here. So that concludes my remarks. Back to you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Ken Hyatt. All right, moving on with our agenda. We are now at presentations. We have two proclamations to present tonight, resolutions, one proclaiming April as Child Abuse Prevention Month, and one proclaiming April 7th, 2021 as Terry Bassett Day. I'd like to begin with a motion and a second to approve these before we present them. May I have a motion?
Landsberg will move.
Okay, Landsberg moves, Mayor Pro Tem Vega seconds. The adoption of both resolutions. Is there any discussion? There being none, all in favor? Well, let's have the clerk call the roll as required by the rules.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Vega,
Aye.
Councilmember Fernandez,
Aye.
Councilmember Garcia Cadena,
Aye.
Councilmember Landsberg,
Aye.
Mayor Stallard.
Aye. Thank you. Okay, we've now approved our resolutions, and to present the April as Child Abuse Prevention Month, I've asked Mayor Pro Tem Myra Vega to do the presentation. Do we have someone here to receive it? Tracy, are you here?
Yes, I am, Mayor Stallard.
All right, well then, Myra, why don't you proceed to share the resolution with Tracy Favre, who is the Executive Director of the Court Appointed Special Advocates Program here in Woodland.
My pleasure, Mayor Stallard. So this is City of Woodland Proclamation recognizing April 2021 as Child Abuse Prevention Month. Whereas child abuse and neglect continue to pose serious threats to our nation's children, and whereas adverse childhood experiences such as physical, emotional, and sexual abuse, neglect, and parental stress or illness can have a short and long-term outcomes, including multitude of health and social problems, and early evidence-based prevention and intervention efforts are less costly than trying to fix the adverse effects of child maltreatment, both in human and financial terms. And whereas in 2019, according to the California Child Welfare Indicators Project, 615 children in Yolo County were found to be victims of abuse and/or neglect. And whereas preventing child abuse and neglect is a community issue, and we all have a responsibility to nurture and protect our children and help ensure they become healthy and productive adults. And whereas the Child Abuse Prevention Council of Yolo County, a Yolo County Children's Alliance program, coordinates the community's effort to prevent and respond to child abuse and neglect, and is composed of a community partner and representative from the following agencies and organizations: Communicare Healthcare Centers, Empower Yolo, First 5 Yolo, West Sacramento Police Department, Yolo County Court Appointed Special Advocates, Yolo County District Attorney's Office, Multidisciplinary Interview Center, Yolo County Health and Human Services, Child, Youth, and Family Branch and Community Health Branch, Yolo County Office of Education, and Yolo County Prevention. And whereas in Yolo County, over 20 agencies and community organizations are collaborating in their efforts to prevent child abuse and neglect and support families through the YCCA Yolo Family Strengthening Network. And whereas the people of Yolo County are encouraged to strengthen families and support child abuse prevention activities in their communities by engaging with the new YCCA-CAPC campaign, Strong Families YOLO, which is a new website that encourages everyone to see how we all play a part in caring for YOLO children and strengthening YOLO families, with hundreds of resources and practical ideas divided into 15 different roles, including business owners, family members, first responders, youth, neighbors, parents, childcare providers, and youth activity leaders. Now therefore be it resolved that the City Council of the City of Woodland hereby declares the month of April 2021 to be Child Abuse Prevention Month.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Vega. And we're so happy to have someone as important to our community as Tracy Favre for her work at Court Appointed Special Advocates, which pairs caring individuals with dependent children who are under the supervision of the courts. Tracy, we'd like to say a few words while you're with us this evening.
I wouldn't mind, Mayor Stallard. Thank you very much for your kind words. I truly appreciate that. And Mayor Pro Tem Vega, thank you. That resolution was quite a mouthful, and you did a fantastic job. Thank you so much for being willing to read all of that. The Child Abuse Prevention Council is really proud to do this work, and we so appreciate the City Council, the City of Woodland, supporting the work that we do, most importantly, supporting children and families in the work that you do, supporting the work that we are trying to do, preventing abuse and neglect, and supporting families in the city of Woodland, in the larger community. And we're really excited this year in particular to be rolling out this new website that was mentioned in the resolution. It's called Strong Families YOLO, and I would really encourage folks to check out this website, www.strongfamiliesyolo.org. It's an incredible new resource that anyone can go and find ways to connect and ideas for connecting to youth, to children, to families, finding ways to support, finding ways to be the one to help support families, to help support youth, to really make those strong connections that are really the key difference. Because as I heard earlier in the meeting, actually from you, Mayor Stallard, we can't depend on government to do everything for us. We have to play a role ourselves as citizens, as friends, families, neighbors. We all have to step up and do what we can when we can. And that's what this resource is intended to provide. That when we all work together, we can all thrive. And that's the hope. And that's why the CAPC is excited to roll out this additional resource. And if we can help direct some energy towards it, it will hopefully make some additional impact. So again, thank you all for the time today. I think I've said enough. I just appreciate your work and your support of the work that the Child Abuse Prevention Council is doing.
I would just like to add that Tracy's organization does the most amazing things. And caring adults who care about children, the welfare of children, pair themselves with an individual child who really needs a friend that's not part of the official world, that's all around them and they're in the court system. And the cool thing is, those people who help those kids get so much out of it. They're so grateful. It's grown their hearts. So if you have that kind of heart and you want to explore it, you should talk to Tracy's organization. She begins training classes a couple times a year at least, okay?
Tracy, as a matter of fact, we start class again on Monday, and invite me back. You won't be able to get me to stop talking as quickly as I did tonight. Invite me back and I'll tell you more about CASA. I'm always happy to talk about that. But thank you very much again for the shout out about CASA. That's absolutely near and dear to my heart. And we always need more volunteers so that we can serve more kids in our foster care system. That's absolutely true.
Thank you, Tracy. And again, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. All right, we'll move on to the second presentation this evening. And it's my pleasure to share this resolution designated April 7, which is tomorrow, as Terry Bassett Day, along with a resolution which totally inadequately covers the scope of what he's done over 39 and a third years in the transportation business. He literally started public transportation as a countywide activity when he went to work for the county of Yolo, and turned his basically one person office at the county into an independent special district that today runs something like 45 buses, 45 CNG buses, 11 enhanced diesel buses, paratransit. He developed a fueling facility for CNG from compressed natural gas, developed a world-class headquarters for his transit district, did so many things. So I'll go ahead and read the resolution. But again, nothing I can say tonight adequately covers the impact Terry has had in the city of Woodland and the county of Yolo and beyond in a remarkable career of service. So whereas Terry Bassett was hired by Yolo County in 1981, and since that time, Terry has advanced public transportation from very little to a joint powers authority, and then to a special district, starting with 11 used diesel polluting buses to a modern fleet of 49 compressed natural gas buses and 6 low emission diesel buses, along with paratransit service. And whereas to do all this, Terry Bassett has always been alert to funding opportunities and quick to ensure that Yolo County received its fair share of funds, including substantial funding to build a modern headquarters transit center, along with establishing remote transit centers in various communities. And whereas Terry Bassett has always been a progressive thinker, involving the Yolo County Transportation District in leading edge technology practices, including being among the first transit operators to install bike racks on buses, as well as guiding the district to join the Capital Corridor Joint Powers Authority, and thus bring intercity rail service to Yolo County, and further seeking and securing funds to establish a compressed natural gas refueling facility at the Yolo Bus headquarters, which benefits private sector CNG fleets as well. And whereas through Terry Bassett's many efforts, not only are the citizens of Yolo County benefited by the transportation infrastructure he has put in place, but the clean fuel buses replaced private vehicles on the road, thereby helping clean the air and benefiting the environment. And whereas Terry has, over the years, worked out many difficult problems, such as helping to develop a single fare card for use among various transit operators in the region, including transfer agreements and the right to operate our buses in jurisdictions served by other transit operators. And whereas Terry Bassett established many firsts for transit service, not only to communities which formerly had no transit service, but also hourly service to Sacramento International Airport, which had previously had no public transit service and was perhaps the largest airport in the country at the time that still had no public transit. And whereas Terry Bassett did all these things while maintaining a polite, calm, and engaging demeanor, now therefore be it resolved that the City Council of the City of Woodland, by and through its elected leaders, congratulates Terry Bassett on his service in the public interest and expresses its pride that he is a resident of Woodland, and wish him well-deserved happiness in the years ahead. Be it further resolved that in appreciation of all he has done for others, that tomorrow, April 7th, 2021, be declared Terry Bassett Day in the City of Woodland. Congratulations, Terry. You leave with so much having been accomplished. Let's give a little round of applause for Terry. Okay, we'll have to make do with what we can do over the internet. Terry, do you have a few cards, a little valedictory you'd like to share with us tonight?
Yeah, just a few comments. So you and I talked about it briefly a little while earlier today. So you and I have known each other for some 26 years of the 39 and a third years I've been here. Over 78,600 hours on the job. I could learn to fly a 747 with that many hours, I'm sure. We've done enough service to equal the entire population of the state of California. That's what our ridership's been in the years that I've been here. If everybody were to touch their fingertips together in a big circle, all of our ridership could circle Earth at the equator 1.7 times. So just imagine a continuous line. I feel sorry for those that are in the water. The continuous line would be that long. We also ran enough service to equal about 80 years worth of Levi Stadium sold out football games. That's what the ridership's been like. We've gone through a lot of changes with the help of you, Mayor Stollard, and other members of the community. Woodland should stand proud with some of what it does have. I know we're going through some difficult times because of COVID, but we think we're going to be bouncing back, and we'll be thriving, albeit in probably a modified form. So there's a lot of good things to look forward to. I will be watching from a distance. I will not be getting on Zoom or anything like that. I will provide some guidance on the side if requested. But I'm honored and greatly appreciate what you bestowed upon me tonight.
Thank you, Terry. I'm sorry we can't do this in person, but that's the nature of the times. And we wish you great happiness with your family and friends going forward, and rest content that your legacy will be carefully protected and nurtured and move forward with those who come after you, okay?
Great. Thank you very much, Tom.
All right, thank you. That concludes our presentations this evening. We'll now proceed to the rest of our agenda, beginning with the consent calendar, which is items 5 through 17. Are there any items on the consent calendar that any member wishes to have removed for independent consideration? It's also possible to comment on an item without taking it off the calendar. Vicki Fernandez.
Thank you, Mayor Stallard. I just have a comment or a correction to make on our minutes. If you'll indulge me. Please. On the promise program, and not to discredit my fellow council member Garcia Cadena, but it was just reversed. I made the motion and
she seconded.
And she seconded. So I just wanted to make that correction, if you don't mind.
We'll have that correction noted in the action tonight. Is there any other corrections or changes tonight?
Mayor Stallard?
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem Vega.
So item 17, I have a conflict. That project is near my home, so I will be abstaining from that item.
Thank you for reminding me. You told me in advance and I forgot. Okay, we will consider the vote to include you for all items except for item 17. You will not be participating. Any other changes tonight, or questions or comments? If not, I would entertain a motion that the consent calendar be adopted. Items 3 through 17. Excuse me, item 5 through 17.
I will make the motion that we accept the consent calendar, item 5 through 17, as presented.
Motion by.
Second that.
Who will second?
Go ahead.
Vicky. All right. Motion by. I forgot who made the motion.
Me.
Thank you. Councilmember Garcia Cadena makes the motion. Councilmember Fernandez seconds the motion to adopt the consent calendar, items 5 through 17. Mayor Pro Tem Vega will be included in the motion with the exception of the final item for which she excludes herself due to conflict. All right, is there further discussion of the motion? There being none, we'll call for the vote and we'll ask the clerk to do the roll call.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Vega?
Aye.
Councilmember Fernandez?
Aye.
Councilmember Garcia Cadena?
Aye.
Councilmember Landsberg?
Aye.
Mayor Stallard?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes the discussion of the consent calendar. I did not ask for public comment on the consent calendar. Was there any, Madam Clerk?
No.
Thank you. All right, then we are able to move forward to the public hearing. Item 18, the public hearing and approval of the fiscal year 2019-2020 Community Development Block Grant Consolidated Annual Performance and Evaluation Report. This is something we're required to do for the federal government. Mr. Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll hand it directly over to Senior Planner Dan Socolow, who provides an annual report to the council and the community on our use of the CDBG dollars that we get allocated every year. So Dan is before you with a summary of how we invested those dollars and what the status of our expenditure is per the federal requirements. So with that, we'll hold a public hearing and have Mr. Socolow walk you through the highlights.
You want me? Okay, shall I open the public hearing? Or do you want to hear the report and then the public hearing?
Let's go ahead and hear the report and then open the hearing upon conclusion.
Okay, Mr. Socolow, please proceed.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. Dan Socolow, Community Services Department. As the city manager noted, each year we're required to submit a report to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development on our CDBG activities. It's known as the CAPER. It's the Consolidated Annual Performance and Evaluation Report. While it seems focused on CDBG funded activities in our community, it actually really tracks with our 5-year CDBG plan, which is our consolidated plan. And there are a number of things, activities, programs, which the city pursues, which aren't necessarily funded through CDBG, but which are included on our consolidated plan as high priorities and goals of the city. Looking at fiscal year 1920, there were various construction and public service activities funded through CDBG. Two notable construction activities that have been completed. One was additional rehabilitation work at Cottonwood Meadows, which is an affordable housing rental project for seniors owned by New Hope Community Development Corporation, which is the nonprofit development arm of Yellow County Housing. So that was completed. Another one was Communicare built, essentially would be a wellness garden, and we helped fund that. And that's actually at their facility here in Woodland, the Hanson Family Health Center. And last year they were able to provide more than 1,400 pounds of fresh produce for clients of the Hanson Family Health Center. And they do have plans actually to expand the facility. Other construction activities, we did design our 1920 ADA accessibility project that will actually go out to bid this spring and construction this summer, combined with funding for the 2021 project as well. Design construction cost estimates were done for the library ADA rehab project. We will probably be coming back for additional funds to complete the budget for construction, but that was designed and we do have a construction cost estimate. Looking at public services, I'll highlight just 3 of them. I think we funded 8 or 9 of them. One would be Short-Term Emergency Aid Committee. The funding they used from the city CDBG program was used for homeless prevention. So these are very low. In some cases, extremely low income households are at risk of being evicted because they're a little bit short on their rent. So that was one of the programs we funded. Legal Services in Northern California did receive funding, and they do a fair housing project, and they interacted with about 280 individuals during the fiscal year 1920, assisting them with fair housing related issues for rentals. And these are low income, in some cases, extremely low income households. Looking a little more broadly, there were obviously a few other things we did during fiscal year 1920, not necessarily funded through CDBG, but do connect well to the goals and the strategy of our 5-year CDBG plan. One that you've probably heard of before is Project Room Key. That's the effort to shelter vulnerable homeless during the pandemic. That started actually in March of 2020. The initial funding was for the motel stays was from a grant the city has. Later, the county took over funding the motel stays, but in particular, our homeless coordinator, Kristen Klein, I've assisted her. We've done a lot of work in terms of placing, screening individuals into Project Room Key. This effort also continues in not only in Woodland, but in Davis and West Sacramento, working with the management staff of the motels when issues come up, working with social workers who were embedded at the sites, which included social workers from the public defender's office, as well as staff who still staff the 2 sites in Woodland from Empower Yellow, who've been fantastic, and assisting whenever possible in exiting people to permitted housing, particularly older folks, older homeless individuals. So that's kind of a quick summary of our fiscal year 1920 activities for our CDBG action plan. Other than that, this is a public hearing this evening. So as the mayor noted, we will need to open the public hearing. We did notice the draft caper in the Daily Democrat, as well as for a 16-day period online, as well as a copy was available at our community development department at City Hall. Typically, we'd also have a copy available at the community center, but our facility is not fully open at this time. We did not, as of this evening, receive comments. If council has any questions on the caper, staff would be happy to respond. Thank you.
All right. I think before we go to do questions from the council, I'll open the public hearing. Anyone wishing to comment on the proposed draft report are welcome to speak at this time. Madam Clerk, do we have any input?
No, I don't see any, Mayor Stellard.
And there's no one calling in or nothing by email?
No.
That being the case, public hearing is now closed. Council members, do you have questions of Mr. Sokolow about this report? I'm hearing none. And there's two recommended actions. First is this public hearing, which we've concluded. The second is to adopt a resolution, essentially authorizing the submission of the report. Does anyone wish to make that motion?
Motion by Mayor Pro Tem Vega.
Thank you.
Second by Fernandez.
Motion by Mayor Pro Tem Vega, seconded by Council Member Fernandez. Thank you very much. Further discussion? There being none, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Vega.
Aye. Aye.
Councilmember Fernandez.
Aye.
Councilmember Garcia Cadena.
Aye.
Councilmember Landsberg.
Aye.
Mayor Stellard.
Aye. Before we leave this item, I just want to say that I have tremendous respect for Mr. Sokolow. There's a lot of detail in this business, and he takes care of it and calmly gets through it every year and keeps us receiving the funds and complying with the federal government requirements. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we can move along now to the reports of the city manager. And we want to emphasize, we have a report on COVID every week because it is such an important focus of the efforts of our city during the pandemic. So even though things are much better than they've been in the past, we still want to stay abreast of what's new. Ken, when we report on COVID, please.
Yeah, so thank you. And once again, I guess I'm happy to report that this week's COVID update is coated with optimism, largely driven by continued stabilization in our case rates that we see reported from the county. All of this in the context of what's happening globally, if not here nationally in the US, with a spike which is actually predicted from what the experts anticipated. The trend has been every 20 weeks, there is a resurgence of cases. However, we've been somewhat insulated by that, and I would largely attribute, again, our community's collective commitment to practicing good distancing and COVID compliant behaviors, but also a very strong and unified effort to get vaccines out to our community, particularly those that are most vulnerable here in Woodland and Yolo County. So I want to give a shout out to all those folks and organizations that are doubling down on trying to get the vaccines to our community members. As of today, the county reports that 27% of county residents now have been vaccinated. And 71% of seniors 65 and over have been vaccinated. So significant accomplishment for our community. Also, positive is 60% of our ag workers throughout Yolo County have been vaccinated as well. So again, tribute to the efforts and coordination across all of our organizations in the health industry to get those vaccines out. As you all know, as of the 15th, which will be next week, every resident over 16 will now be eligible to get access to the vaccine. So that will be another significant milestone to begin to expand our vaccination of our community. And with a large number of vaccines now being able to be accessed through multiple means, we've got clinics that are offered by Dignity Health at the community center. UC Davis is partnering with Healthy Davis Together and have a clinic during the week at the Woodland Community College. North Valley Indian Healthcare, as Councilmember Garcia Cadena mentioned, also has vaccines available. This is in addition to vaccines that are available through your healthcare provider, as well as pharmacies throughout town. So lots of potential and no excuse not to go get vaccinated at the moment. And also want to give a shout out to our fire departments at the request of County Health, Chief Zane and his staff, have begun providing vaccines to those that are homebound and actually going into homes and conducting an assessment and giving access and administering vaccines to those that are unable to leave their homes. So interested residents in that program should call 211 to see if they are eligible and schedule an in-home visit for their vaccine. And then lastly, as the state continues to evolve their guidance, I want to call attention to effective the 15th, the state's new guidance around group gatherings will go into effect. So the state recently issued new guidance around size and format for gatherings, which will go into effect next week. And then just today, the governor announced that as of June 15th, the plan is to eliminate all restrictive tiers under the blueprint for reopening. So we're quickly heading into a return to normal that we've all been waiting for over a year now. But want to, again, always continue to encourage our community and what our community members to stay focused on seeing this to the end, and encourage people to access resources either through their healthcare provider or go to the county website for any updates around access to vaccines, as well as guidance that's being updated, it seems like on a daily basis now. So with that, I will turn it back to the council for any questions.
Ken, did you mention how many hospitalizations there are currently for COVID?
I did not mention that. I believe I can pull that up real quick, but the hospitalizations continue to remain very low, even though the case rates are going up. And I guess, again, I would attribute that to those that are most vulnerable in our communities have now been given access to the vaccine and received that. So we continue to see those hospitalizations stay very low, plenty of capacity.
Thank you. Questions, members of the council? Any member of the public have a question on this issue? All right, hearing none, that completes our discussion of the COVID-19 response and preparedness. We'll move on to item 20, which is discussion of residential receptacle location requirements. And that's the fancy name for toters. Where are we going to put them? And where are we not going to put them? City Manager Ken Hyatt.
Great. So it's my pleasure to introduce this item. I'll have Steve Coyle, our Deputy Director of Community Development, walk you through the background and why we actually have this ordinance before you. But the ever-sensitive topic of waste and refuse in our community and how we handle that has brought us to one unique issue, which is particularly in the residential setting. In certain cases, residents continue to not pull up their waste receptacles after service has been provided, often leaving them in the street or in their front yards, creating visual blight within the neighborhood. And through our code enforcement efforts and ongoing efforts to elevate the overall aesthetic in the community and address situations like this, we've identified that the city currently does not have a requirement articulated in the form of an ordinance that informs the community as to what the requirements and expectations are for how and when trash, recycling, and green waste receptacles are to be placed and removed from the street. So with that, we will be walking the council through a bit more specifics around the issue at hand that we're trying to address, a draft ordinance that's been put forth for the council's consideration, community feedback. And given some feedback from the council already around this item, my suggestion will be, rather than have the council maybe feel pressured into proceeding with waiving the first reading and then coming back to the next meeting with second reading, if it's the council's pleasure, what I would recommend is hear the context for the ordinance, some of the details that are articulated, and then offer feedback to staff to go back and refine the language, and then we can come back at a future meeting with a revised first reading of the ordinance moving forward from there. So with that, I will ask Steve Coyle to walk the council through the details of the ordinance.
Thank you, City Manager Ken Hyatt, and I will take a few minutes, Mayor and council members, to describe first of all, the rationale, why we need an ordinance and what it is we're trying to accomplish in that effort. So the ordinance is new. It will be it'll consist of new requirements, both in the time and the placement of, here it says garbage in the yard refuse receptacles, which we call carts, or refer to as carts in the presentation, and providing resources and recommendations for compliance. Jay? So first of all, hopefully this is not a solution looking for the problem. Rather, this has been complaint driven. Our code compliance officer probably has literally dozens of complaints that come up annually, and perhaps in terms of other kinds of observations of receptacles that are left in the streets, sometimes all week. Carts are left in planting strips in the front yards and driveways. So we do have many complaints from neighbors, and there are no clear rules or guidelines for code compliance. And for example, no directions for alley placement, which is why we're trying to accomplish this through a new ordinance. So first of all, I spent a little time driving around just trying to give you some idea of some of the issues we're facing. First of all, there's carts left in the street for days on end, and they do obstruct parking and traffic. Carts, this is one actually near my house, carts left on planting strips, they kill the ground cover, and at least from my view, they don't contribute to the beauty of some of our great neighborhoods. So the example I took a picture of, those have been there since I've lived in Woodland. They've never moved, except they are put out on the street during pickup, but then they're removed back to the planting strip. We do also see misplaced carts that block the sidewalks, so they make someone walk around them or into the street to circumvent them. Carts left in driveways, in our opinion, are unsightly, and this is just an example. I mean, there are certainly worse things we can look at, and code compliance deals with all kinds of blight issues. But in particular, if we can get people choose to relocate or perhaps screen those carts, it would help avoid this kind of frontage. Carts left exposed in front yards contribute to what we consider visual blight. And here's a couple of examples here. Now, this is just a few instances. Most residents, we find, screen their carts or place them on the side yard. So it's not a matter of having a ubiquitous problem, but rather how can we deal with those people who are not just complying with some very simple, basic rules of how they present, how they screen their carts during the week. Most residents, they do know where and when to place, retrieve, and visually screen their carts. So this is not, again, this is not a citywide problem, but we do see enough of people who need more guidance, which is the underlying purpose behind this ordinance. So here's an example. It's pickup day, and people have their carts right at the curb, just as the proper way to place their carts for trash removal. So the ordinance, the ordinance attempts to do is codify, first of all, the times when a resident can place their cart and remove their cart for the scheduled collection day. And then the receptacles must be removed from the street and screened from public view as soon as possible. And we're saying, but no later than 24 hours after collection. We are aware, and the city manager shared with me that this may cause some issues, particularly in the middle of winter when at 6 p.m. it's dark out and people have to struggle to get their cart out in the dark. So that's one of the reasons, I guess, we really need to look more closely at the times we're proposing for placing the carts and retrieving them. And then in terms of placements, I think this actually is important. We need people to place them at the curb or street edge. And this is a little bit specific, 3 feet from an obstruction, but we do need as much as possible people to place the carts where drivers, waste management drivers, don't have to swing in or swing out too far. So, and generally this is not a problem, but to the extent possible, we want to describe to people the proper placement of for people that have frontages or have private driveways or on alleys, so that they actually know where to place their carts and not block pedestrian access. So that's the end of my presentation. I showed you some examples of the good, bad, and the ugly, and happy to take any questions or comments or particularly suggestions for how we can improve this ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Coyle. We appreciate the care and thought that's gone into this. Because it is new, it certainly gave us all something to think about. You know, my sharing was, I'm sorry it's necessary, but you showed us that there's many examples around the community where some of our residents aren't perhaps being as thoughtful as they could in terms of how their neighbors feel. Colleagues, do you have any additional guidance you'd like to provide to our city leadership on this proposed ordinance? Yes, Councilmember Garcia Cadena.
Hello, thank you. And I do appreciate all the thought that goes into this, and I can see the reasoning behind it. I do have a concern with the 6 p.m. and an example of that is, and I was sharing this with City Manager Ken Hyatt, some of my neighbors are elderly and they have a lawn service that they've set up for Monday, and their toters go out at 3 or 4 when their lawn service is finished on Monday evening, so that they're all available for the Tuesday pickup. And it would be a real issue for these neighbors to have to take their toter out themselves when it's full. We live over here on the north side and we have big front yards and really deep backyards, and our toters get full. So that's my concern. And so my thought was, if we're saying 24 hours after pickup, perhaps it's 24 hours before pickup, or even noon or something. But 6 p.m. I think is probably not very realistic for a lot of people.
Thank you, Council Member. Anyone else? I see Vicky Fernandez. Did you wish to comment?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Stallard. Again, I'd like to agree with Councilmember Garcia Cadena on maybe the timeframes that we're looking at specifying for community members. There are different circumstances. The elderly, or perhaps people who work out of town or have a schedule that doesn't allow them to put it out exactly at 6 or be there within that time frame. I think I appreciate all the work and research that has gone into this, but I think the comment that was in the presentation was guidance, and maybe starting with education of and reminders for our community members of what we would like to see occur versus creating an ordinance for enforcement or punishment for those who don't abide by it. I think that there are probably more people who tend to be respectful of maintaining their residence in a respectful manner to their neighbors, and I would assume that it's the minority of people who are having that circumstance that's occurring in their neighborhood. So maybe education or maybe a simple reminder for those individuals might be a first process versus an ordinance that requires people to feel that we're targeting and inflicting some sort of punishment for having to maintain their toters in a certain location and removing them or putting them out at a certain time. Also, just wanted to echo that I think maybe with our mayor's minute, the idea of helping one another, that maybe if a neighbor is having trouble getting their toters in or out in a timely manner, that maybe a neighbor could provide that assistance, and maybe just a kind reminder might be sufficient to kind of to take care of that. I know my husband, who's retired, goes around and puts toters away for those that are working during the day, and that's kind of his little neighborhood duty. And so I kind of feel that that's kind of the direction I would like to see occur before we inflict some sort of ordinance, is maybe trying a more positive approach, and education and guidance would be my first request, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Member Fernandez. Additional council comment?
Here's Stellar, I have a comment. Yeah, so I wanted to echo what Council Member Fernandez said about education. I think there is an opportunity, given that we don't have any kind of standards or recommendations that we have in place now, that we take the opportunity to provide some general education. I definitely am of the mindset that I think folks want to do the right thing. They want to be neighborly. And I'm sure there's those exceptions, but I would like to have that education be available. And again, Mayor Stollard, your mayor's minutes really hit home for me. Again, I think being neighborly, I get concerned about the time frames, because say somebody's going on vacation. I'll use myself as an example. My neighbor and I kind of look out for each other when somebody's going to be out of town. We help each other out to that extent that we can. But there are folks that may not have that. So there are, COVID has shown us that there's some kind of our routine gets kind of turned upside down with little notice. So the education, awareness, I think goes a long way.
Thank you. I think I heard from everybody but Council Member Landsberg. Any comments, Rich?
You don't want to hear from me on this issue. I'll pass it and comment.
Okay. Well, I think the council has spoken. We want to see the problem solved. We wonder if there are some perhaps intermediate approaches that might be less onerous, more neighborly, and hopefully effective. And perhaps, Mr. Manager, we could suspend further consideration of this maybe for 3 months, invite our code enforcement officer, develop a door hanger or something for these situations that seem to be unacceptable. And if we don't see remediation, we'd like to hear back. And then maybe in those situations, we want to know how many of them there are, and see if we can't deal with them on a more immediate basis, then we'll reconsider the ordinance as proposed, but perhaps with some changes as suggested tonight. Colleagues, is that a fair synopsis of our discussion? Okay.
Yes. Yes,
Mr. Mayor, this issue should be rolled into the issues that we're dealing with waste management. They're also dealing with an educational component to the whole issue of separating garbage from recyclables. This would perfectly fit in with that, and at some point could be adjusted so that their education campaign adds this component to it. We still haven't finished that issue of waste management, but this is really right up their alley.
Thank you, Council Member Landsberg. So, Mr. Hyatt, please incorporate that comment as well. Is there any other direction you're seeking this evening?
No, appreciate the feedback and thoughtful input, and we'll take that back and report back as appropriate.
Okay, we thank Steve Coyle and all the staff for their efforts on this. The goal is to solve the problem, and we'll continue to pursue that goal, okay? That concludes our discussion of item 20, and it moves us along.
Mayor, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I did just want to, make sure there was no public comment on that issue.
Thank you. Anna, please interrupt me if I ever neglect to do that, but is there public comment tonight on this issue?
No, no public comment.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Walls, for reminding me of my duty. All right, so that takes us to item 21. This is a 3-year agreement with Advanced Peace to provide gun violence reduction program services to our city. City Manager Ken Hyatt.
Thank you, Mayor. Members of the council, as the mayor introduced, this item is to have the council consider entering into a 3-year agreement with Advanced Peace to provide gun violence and reduction program services to our community in partnership with RISE, local nonprofit organization. I don't need to remind the council and the community that over the last 6 years, we've seen an alarming increase in the rate of gun violence in our community. Our department, police department, in cooperation with other agencies, have been actively pursuing strategies to begin to address this alarming trend. And investigations have confirmed that much of this activity is associated with gang violence in our community, and strategies to address this trend are difficult and time intensive, and with the increasing calls for service with our police departments, in talking with the chief and investigating other strategies being deployed in other communities, it's become evident our success to begin to turn this trend the other direction is not going to be successful relying on law enforcement. And we really need to rethink how we approach this issue in our community. Advanced Peace reached out to Chief Caff several years ago and introduced him to models that have been successful in other communities here in Northern California, notably Richmond, Sacramento, now Stockton, as well as Fresno, have engaged with Advanced Peace and deployed their model with success around changing the behavior through focusing change on the person, right? These behaviors are not behaviors that are common and simply addressed through informing people about the laws, right? These are longstanding issues at a personal level that, for us to be effective at changing the gun violence trend in our community, we really need to get to the heart of the individuals that are behind some of this activity. And so evaluating Advanced Peace in their program in partnership with our community members, we are confident that with a sustained effort and therefore the 3-year agreement with them, we can be successful in seeing similar positive results here in Woodland. So we invited Khalid Mataki, the Chief Operating Officer for Advanced Peace, to come present to the council their model that they've developed and partnered with other communities successfully, what that might look like in the Woodland context, and specifically in partnership with Tico Zendejas, the Executive Director of RISE. And we're confident and excited to be able to deliver this opportunity to our community. And unfortunately, Chief Caff is not available this week. We do have Deputy Chief Cucci, who's available for additional insight into the issue that we're grappling with and how we feel confident that this program will be successful. So with that, Khalid, I'd like to hand it over to you and have you introduce yourself and Advanced Peace a little bit more broadly to the council and the community, and talk about the program and agreement that we're looking forward to partner with you on.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. City Manager. Good evening, Mayor, Mr. Mayor, members of council, City Manager, and other community members who may be with us. My name is Khalid Mataki. I am the Chief Operating Officer for Advanced Peace, and I'm here to kind of give just a high-level overview of the Advanced Peace framework, and then I'll be happy to answer any questions. I would say that I'm particularly excited about this opportunity to partner with the City of Woodland. I shared with your City Manager and your Chief that many moons ago, I worked as a social worker in Woodland in the early 2000s for several years. Back then it was called, for the Priolo County, departments of employment and social services off of Cottonwood Street. So there's a certain spot in my heart for Woodland, and I'm really excited about having the opportunity to partner with the community of Woodland again. And I guess at this point I should share my screen, I guess. If I can get this. Hopefully everybody can see that. All right, so I'm gonna, like I said, I'll give a kind of a high level overview, and hopefully we can have more of a discussion. But advanced peace, okay, now this thing. Advanced peace is a community-based gun violence reduction program. It was developed by within local government, within the city of Richmond, back in 2005, 2006, 2007, when the city of Richmond was identified at that point. City of Richmond, the Bay Area being a city of less than 100,000 people, was identified as having one of the highest gun violence rates in the country per capita. And after a long assessment, the city of Richmond, the city council, started a new office. They called it the Office of Neighborhood Safety. And at that point in 2007, it was the first office of its kind. It was in the city manager's office, and it was specifically geared with reducing gun violence in the city of Richmond. Since that time, there's probably over 20 similar offices now, including DC, Indiana, Stockton, Oakland, and other cities. But at that time, it was the first office that was exclusively and specifically focused on gun violence reduction within the city manager's office. One of the things that came out of that work, that body of work, was realizing that in most cities, the majority of violent crime is normally driven by a handful of individual community members, often referred to in some circles, including law enforcement, as the one percenters. And these one percenters typically drive, according to research that's been continues to validate this point, sometimes responsible for over 70% of the violence within these communities. And so one of the findings that came out of this experience from the city of Richmond was that these individuals, even though they're identified as the most lethal individuals within a community, are absolutely disconnected most of the time from resources. So hence that was the beginning of the idea of forming the Advanced Peacemaker Fellowship. There's a model that was developed back in the late 90s, early 2000s that was developed by the Department of Justice, called the Comprehensive Community Safety Model. And the idea behind this model, which has sustained the period of time for the most part, is that for a community to really have safety, there needs to be kind of four sectors that are working together. The prevention sector, the intervention sector, law enforcement, and what's often referred to as reentry, or also known as those individuals returning from the prison system back to the community. When I was the former director of violence prevention in the city of Sacramento, just to share a quick story, we rolled out a pretty comprehensive community-based grant program in 2015. And in 2015, the city of Sacramento, who I was working for, had experienced a 38% increase in gun violence. And it had kind of had me scratching my head because we had a pretty robust, amazing prevention programs going on. We had one of the kind of better trained law enforcement police departments in the state. We were doing some really creative things in the juvenile justice system with the probation chief. And we had about 30 community-based partners through our grant program that was serving over 5,000 kids in our gang prevention grants. And yet our gun violence continues to go up, 38% in 2015, an additional 12% on top of that 38% in 2016. And then it kind of leveled off in 2017. But by then we were above 50% from where we started. And so as director of violence prevention, like I said, I was scratching my head and I knew there was some amazing work going on, but what we came to realize is that we had a gap. We had a gap in the intervention space, and that these so-called one percenters weren't being reached with any of our programming. And often there's various reasons for that, but that was the reality. We know that these individuals oftentimes, whether we look at the victim or the so-called suspect or perpetrator, are usually between 16 and 28 years old. A lot of them, per the data, is Black and brown young men. And oftentimes they're very resistant to programming. So even though we're doing some amazing things in the community, we weren't reaching those. So there's this gap that we had in the space of intervention. And so Advanced Peace, we believe, effectively fills that gap by reaching what's often a very hard to reach population. And it's more than reaching them, because one thing is identifying these so-called one percenters. Another thing is reaching them. And another thing is keeping them engaged for an amount of period of time to where there can actually be personal and transformational development and a healing that starts to take place. Because one of the things that we know about these one percenters is that they've often experienced a tremendous amount of trauma, often going back to their childhood. Some of you may be familiar with the term ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. They've been exposed to a lot of violence, and as we know from the public health literature, as it relates to violence prevention, hurt people hurt people. And so we had, what you have in a lot of communities is individuals who are often, once again, most dangerous individuals, often suspects in some of the recent gun violence, but have been able to avoid the reaches of the criminal justice system. And they're completely disconnected from resources. So out of 8 years of looking at the clients that have come through the program, we've seen that over 90% of the clients that have been served, we do a little mini assessment when they come in, and over 90% of them were not receiving any type of community-based or public services at the time of enrollment. All right, so over 90%, they're not in school, they're not working, they're not going to church, they're not engaged in any kind of social service programs. So you have a recipe here where you have, once again, the most lethal individuals that are completely disconnected from resources. And that's what Advanced Peace, we believe, we bring to the table, and we believe we do it well. The methodology of Advanced Peace is grounded in evidence-based practices. These evidence-based practices include street outreach, mentoring, intensive case management, life skills, cognitive behavioral therapy, and subsidized employment. Of these, I would say that the first, the street outreach, is a big component of the program. We hire formerly incarcerated individuals who also have a background of violence, and particularly gun violence. These individuals oftentimes have served times in the penitentiary, but there's another quality about these individuals that we hire, because we pay particular due diligence in finding the right people to do this work. And one of the things that's instrumentally important with those individuals that they've often engaged in the very kind of painful and struggle of healing their own traumas and personal transformation. So in other words, they have survived a lot in their lives, and they've also healed a lot of that trauma. So therefore they can be mentors to younger ones who are trying to walk that path and navigate what they often see as war zones, and with a bullseye on their back. And so they can help them navigate that. And these individuals that we hire have to be from the community that we're partnering with. So we don't bring in individuals from other cities to work in other cities. We take our due diligence to find the right people to do this work that have certain qualities. Then we invest a certain amount of training, healing, and continued support to help them professionalize their skill sets and their lived experiences so that they can be assets for their communities. So I won't go into all the other ones for the sake of time, but just wanted to demonstrate that Advanced Peace is, the methodology is grounded in quite a bit of research now. One of the unique things about the Advanced Peace Peacemaker Fellowship is we do commit to what some will refer to as a long-term engagement process. In other words, it's at minimal an 18-month service delivery model. And so why is that? It is because our intervention methodology is not a secret. The secret sauce is the intervention is the relationship, and the relationship is the intervention. So at the end of the day, it's finding people or individuals in the community members who can build relationships with this, what can be a very hard to serve population, who once again, it can be very resistant to services for various reasons. And so oftentimes it will take time to build that trust, because that trust is what allows us to get into their space and provide that mentoring component to them over this period of time. So in addition to the 18-month framework, the program is built upon what we call 7 daily touch points. And I'll just go over these real briefly. But at the end of the day, the mentors, the credible mentors, who we call neighborhood change agents, the NCAs that we hire for this program, manage a caseload, so to speak, assigned to them. And they're responsible for being, for providing consistent daily doses of love, care, and support for the individuals in the program, and making themselves accessible 365 days of the year, 24/7. And oftentimes we're waiting for that call at 2 o'clock in the morning. We want to be, because when we get those calls, that means that individual it's an indicator for us that person is making a better decision. And so a big part of this is being accessible to those individuals and providing that guidance in those critical moments where they may be ready to make a decision that is very harmful to themselves and others in the community. Another part of this is social services navigation, helping them access community-based service. There's kind of 2 parts to this. One is getting them ready. A lot of them sometimes are not ready to access, for example, substance abuse counseling or anger management classes. They have a certain amount of distrust for these institutions, or they've had bad experiences in terms of cultural competence in trying to access these services. Then on the flip side of that, when we oftentimes get these individuals ready to access these social services, oftentimes these institutions are not ready to serve them. In other words, we've had individuals that we've referred to anger management classes or drug treatment classes. And we've had service providers tell us, for example, this individual is just way too angry to be in this anger management class. Well, that's why they're there, ma'am, or sir. And so what happens is sometimes these individuals need additional support. So our neighborhood change agents, instead of making that hard referral and just kind of sending the paper over to the county social services and making them an appointment, oftentimes it requires our staff to go with them, and oftentimes even sit in the anger management class with them, sit in the substance abuse counseling sessions with them until they are transitioned into that social service and have a relationship with their service provider. Another component of this is what we call transformative travel, getting these young people out of the neighborhood, out of the city, getting them to open their minds to other things that are outside in the world that they may just have no idea of. Many people are shocked to find out that individuals within these communities, within these segments, within our communities, have never been to San Francisco. They've never been to the ocean. They've never been to Six Flags, Vallejo, which is 45 minutes down the road. You know, and so a big part of this, and a lot of times this is kind of where the healing actually takes place, is getting them in this fresh air where they can feel safe. They start thinking about their future. And one of the caveats that we have as it relates to transformative travel, especially when they've been in the program for a while, and we've been able to take young people on trips outside of the state, and even on a couple occasions outside of the country. But in order for them to do that, one of the caveats has been that they have to be willing to travel with their former enemy. In other words, somebody on the other side of the block, somebody on the other side of the gang, somebody on the other side that they believe have been trying to harm them and their family, and they've been trying to harm them. And sometimes these beefs go back generations that they're still feuding about, but they have to be willing to travel with their enemy. And one of the things that we have found in taking these trips, which at the beginning can be very tense at first, but once they come back, one of the things they realize is my enemy is very similar to me. He kind of likes the same food, he dresses the same, he listens to the same music, and they find that they're very similar individuals, and oftentimes those trips, those overnight multi-day trips, transforms into them becoming peacemakers and having a voice of peacemaking within their own networks once they get back to their circle. So that's been a big one for us. Another component of this is what we call the elder circle. This is a group of usually retired or 50 plus elders in our community, and this will be once again specific to each community. So we would work to find elders within the city of Woodland who would be willing to lend their expertise, their wisdom, their networks of professionals, and provide guidance to the staff and to the clients. Oftentimes the elders will be really resourceful when it comes towards the end of the 18-month fellowship, where we're looking to place the clients or the fellows, we refer to them as fellows, into a paid work experience. And they can oftentimes connect us with resources and personal folks who they have personal relationships with that may be willing to give our client a chance at maybe doing an internship at their business and building some work habits. So that is a component of it. And then last but not least is what we call the life maps. And this is normally one of the first things that happens actually when an individual enrolls into the program, is we will sit them down and create specific goals that they want to accomplish. And it's a collaboration process. And it can be something very simple or seemingly simple, like getting a driver's license. Many of them have never had a valid driver's license. Or it could be something bigger, like getting a job. And another part of this is, as you see on the map, a life map milestone allowance. And this part is sometimes controversial, but the life map allowance is an allowance that the clients can earn once they're in the program for at least 6 months. They can earn up to $1,000 a month based on the efforts and accomplishments related to their life map goals. And what we found is these stipends or these allowances are most of the time used for their basic needs. They're used for food and housing and diapers and things of that nature. What it is not, and I should say what it is not as often sometimes has been captured in the media, it is not a payment for not shooting at anybody or not committing crime. You know, I often say in these presentations, I wish it was so simple. I wish I could give somebody $5,000 and they would become automatically upstanding citizens, because that would definitely be a $5,000 worth spending. But it's a lot more complex than that. And the life map allowances, and this idea of incentivized behavioral change is not anything new. It's not anything new as a former social worker. It's been around for decades. What may be a little bit different, a little bit controversial, is the population that we're doing it with. And the reason we do that is because we see these young people as we would our own family, our own kids, deserving and worthy of that investment. And we believe that once they get through the program and once they've made these life changes, these individuals become very viable assets to the community, and hence the reduction in violence. So that's just a little overview, and I'll close up here. I don't want to go too long, but as I mentioned, the program was developed in the local government, city of Richmond. In 2016, the founder, Devone Bogan, the former director and original founding director of the Office of Neighborhood Safety for the city of Richmond, left the city and formed a nonprofit organization called Advanced Peace to help other cities kind of implement some of the best practices and lessons learned from the city of Richmond and to pilot the program. At the time I was a director of violence prevention for the city of Sacramento, we were the first city to partner with Advanced Peace as a pilot. And sure enough, we partnered, we also contracted with the University of California, Berkeley to do the evaluation. And these are some of the initial findings after 2 years of full implementation was a 27% reduction in gun violence citywide. If you drill down on some specific police beats or some specific neighborhoods, that number was actually higher in one of the most violent neighborhoods in North Sacramento. It was a 43% reduction in that specific neighborhood. A 27% reduction citywide. What this slide doesn't show that was captured in the UC Berkeley report is that the neighborhood change agents, the Advanced Peace staff, mediated 108 community conflicts during that two-year period, and interrupted 41 imminent gun violent conflicts that were getting ready to happen. And those translated into a savings of taxpayers, of tremendous savings. So what we know with gun violence is either way you slice it, gun violence is very expensive. And so every gun violent incident per research at minimal is anywhere from $400,000 to $600,000 per shooting. If that is a lethal, if it becomes a homicide, at minimal it's from 1.2 to 2.5 million dollars. So we believe that a program like Advanced Peace, even if it saves one life over the period of 2 years, it basically pays for itself. And I will close out. It was also replicated in Stockton. Stockton was the second city that implemented the program after a little more than a year, experienced a 40% reduction. This is the list of our board of directors who has lent their expertise and their heart and souls to help guide the implementation of Advanced Peace, who, as the city manager mentioned, is now being implemented in several other cities in California and outside California. And with that, I will conclude my presentation and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Thank you, colleague Mutaki. A wonderful presentation about a remarkable program. I'd like to invite my colleagues to ask any questions they may have. So I can't see you all at one time, so signify if you have any questions you'd like to ask. So far, I'm not seeing.
Mayor, I have a comment and a question.
Please proceed.
Khalid, thank you for your presentation. You've done this before, and it looks like it. I did some review checking, and your program is very well received, and you got a great commendation from UC Berkeley. They did this study on your program, and they really like your program. And so, when can you start? Is my first question. And it's a serious question. What's your timeline to get going?
Per approval of this evening's agenda item, we want to get started immediately in finalizing the contract, and we're shooting for a May 1st start date to get the contract executed. I should say it will take some time to kind of, when you're starting from scratch, it's kind of like any organization or business, it will take some time to build the basic infrastructure, to onboard, to recruit and interview and hire the staff and train the staff, and to get them into the community where they can start getting into some of these spaces and building relationships. So we anticipate about a 3 to 6 month onboarding process before the program is fully operational. And we'll be working closely. I didn't get a chance I wanted to hand it off to Tico Zendejas, who we're working closely with, the executive director of RISE, as the fiscal agent and advisory in this strategy, will be playing an instrumental part in onboarding this strategy.
Great. And my second question is, how do you specifically, I hate to use the word target, how do you target the trigger puller, who is the core of the problem, the youngster who is dared to pull the trigger in a situation? Tell me the strategy on recruiting into your program the trigger puller.
Yeah, it's the $1 million question. I really appreciate the question. I think first of all, it starts with hiring the right people. Like we said, most of our individuals we hire are former, have firearm experience and were trigger pullers themselves at one point in their lives. Often the saying says it takes one to know one. And so that's the first part. The second part is working with any type of, we do take referrals from our partners. We've worked closely with the probation department, other community-based organizations, the city resources. Oftentimes, we find that, for example, the police department, they know who are suspects in some of the recent activity. Unfortunately, it's a situation where there is not a case to be made. There's not enough evidence to be made. And that's not unique to Woodland or Sacramento or any other city. On average, nationally, there's about a 50% clearance rate on gun violence. So that means half the trigger pullers are still out there. And oftentimes, we don't have a strategy to engage these individuals besides the law enforcement strategy of, hoping to, if they do it again, to try to catch them and make an arrest. So advanced piece is not to be clear, is not a get out of jail free card. If these individuals are in our program and at some point in time, a case and evidence is brought forward, that case is going to go forward and they're going to get arrested. Advanced Peace is a community-based program, intervening with these individuals, providing opportunities, giving them opportunities to possibly change their mindset, change their lives, and prevent them from doing other harmful activities and or being a victim to gun violence themselves. As we often say, sometimes the victim and the perpetrator are sometimes the same, can often be the same person. And oftentimes what happens is one incident can create a shooter. In other words, I might not be a shooter today. I might be a gang member. I might be involved in a street activity. But if my cousin got killed today, I might be the one in my family that's bent on retaliation and revenge. So I become a shooter now. And so it really is, the streets talk, and it really is keeping an ear to the street and having relationships with those particular networks within each community. And obviously it's a lot more complex than that, but in a nutshell, that kind of hopefully answers part of your question.
It does, thank you. And I have one last question, then I'll be quiet. A couple of years ago, you sponsored an education day for legislatures. Did any good come from that day?
Yes, well, I don't know if we sponsored it, but we definitely worked in partnership with a lot of statewide policy advocates, including Moms Demand Action, Every Town for Gun Safety, and others that do a lot of amazing work with our policymakers on the state level. And fortunately, because of the research that's now been done on our program, they often point to the outcomes and the evidence now that it's been replicated in multiple cities. So I would say yes, definitely, because I understand that the city, currently the governor, is currently looking to expand resources for gun violence prevention. They were very successful in expanding the CalVIP grant, which part of that CalVIP grant actually portioned off a portion of those funds for smaller cities, under 100,000 people. So we're hoping to work. I'm glad you asked that question, because we're really hoping to work with TICO and other community-based partnerships. Not once the city hopefully makes this investment, to leverage that investment that the city is making this evening, hopefully, to apply for other potential statewide funding, including the CalVIP grants. That what we understand is poised for another increase in the governor's budget. So we're really hopeful about that. So the short answer is yes.
Thank you very much. That's all I have.
Thank you, Councilmember Landsberg. I'm just going to go down the line. Councilmember Fernandez, do you have questions tonight?
Well, first, yes, thank you, Mayor Stallard. And I just want to thank you to Advance Peace for the work that you're doing in transforming lives in so many different communities. I'm hopeful that Woodland will be the city of Woodland will be making an investment in the lives of our residents and our young community members who have chosen a path that's difficult maybe for them to get out of alone. So thank you for your work. Thank you to RISE for their partnership and their support of this program, and Chief Caff for his foresight and working with you and looking at other solutions to deal with the issue of gang violence. And to the community members from Yolo County Moms Demand Action for Gun Safety who have reached out and supported your program and look for positive change in our community. And as a mother, knowing that our young lives are valuable and that our residents deserve an opportunity to continue to live safe lives in the city of Woodland. So thank you for the work that you're doing, and know that hopefully the city of Woodland will recognize the investment that we're making if this passes, and that we're investing in the future of our community also. But I have one question after all that. I noticed we're taking a 2-year contract of 21, 22, and 22, 23. What happens after that? Does the program end? Does it continue? Is it reviewed? What happens after 2023?
And real quick, Khalid, if I can just jump in, I need to hop on to another meeting, but I just want to thank the city. Thank you, Mayor Stallard. And this issue, many community members came to City Council about a year ago or more, and asked for some type of a program. And I appreciate the time and intentionality that you all took to really have a plan. So I appreciate us really thinking this through, because what the city has found in Advance Peace is a program that does not exist in our community. They are the expert in this very specific field. And so RISE, as the fiscal agent, is very, very proud to support this organization. And that we're going to act as collaborators and connecting Advance Peace and setting them up for success. But I will definitely let Khalid talk about what happens after the funding comes. But I just want to say thank you, and we're in full support. Yeah, thank you very much. I need to hop off.
Dr. Tico Zendejas, thank you so much for your assistance with this program. I'm sorry you don't have more time, but I'm glad you could join us.
All right.
Right. Now let's return to Councilmember Fernandez's question. What happens after 2 years? Khalid Mutaki?
City Manager, you want me to answer that?
Yes. What do you foresee happening after 2 years?
Okay. Yeah. So
you're hoping a renewal of the contract for year 3 and 4, right?
Yes. We definitely hope that once the reason we require kind of a multi-year partnership is a couple different reasons. But we're hoping that after a program such as a pilot program like this in the city of Woodland can demonstrate itself in a productive way, in a complementary way, to be good partners and demonstrate the impact on the target population, the communities. We're hoping that this is something that the city would consider at that point having the discussion about. And we're also hoping that at that point we can bring in other partners, even on the funding side, to expand the work. There's been discussions already of possibly partnering with the county to target pockets of individuals in other parts of Yolo County that could potentially benefit from the strategy. So I think, we want to create this infrastructure, implement our best practices, demonstrate its impact, invest in the capacity building of social services partners to serve this population. And normally after a couple of cohorts, we would hope that the city of Woodland, the policymakers and other key partners will find a program worthy of continuous investment. And so our goal is to build that capacity, demonstrate best practices, build the professionalism of the street outreach workers, the neighborhood change agents. And then it really, at the end of the day, for us, was a real success story at the end of 3 years, is that there's complete community ownership of that particular strategy.
Thank you, Councilmember Fernandez. Did that answer your question? And do you have additional questions?
No, thank you for your response.
All right. Councilmember Garcia Cadena, do you have questions?
I do, Mr. Mayor, thank you. Mr. Mataki, first, thank you for your commitment to reducing gun violence. It's commendable. But I have a question for Deputy Chief Cucci. Is this program something that would replace YGRIP, or will it be incorporated in with YGRIP, or are they completely separate?
These programs would be separate. We're gonna, Woodland needs multiple ways to reach our youth and to be able to look at gun violence or just any issues that involves our gangs. And not every program is gonna be for every kid. So yes, this is to build on everything that we're already doing.
Okay. Thank you.
Additional questions, Councilmember Garcia Cadena?
No, thank you. That was it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and thank you. And Deputy Chief Cucci. You get promoted every time I talk to you. All right, Mayor Pro Tem Vega, do you have questions tonight?
I do. Thank you, Mayor Stallard. Khalid, thank you so much. This is the second time that I have the pleasure of listening to your program, and I learned something new each time. I want to make a comment to the community and to our colleagues. We adopted a strategic plan a few council meetings ago, and there's 2 areas that we committed as a council that we would focus on: quality of life of our residents and public safety and infrastructure, right? So those 2 kind of came to the top of my mind as I was reflecting and listening to Khalid's presentation. I just, as by way of comment to the program, I think the intensity and the focus of the program is really important. Khalid, you mentioned something that resonated with me, is the fact that some of these individuals are not receiving any resources. They don't have driver's license, they don't have jobs, they're not in school. And that's going into maybe a life that is not desirable is probably their only option. I mean, you can't go get by without having a job, a place to live, so all of the healthcare, so things like that. So I really think that the intense effort and the social work and that really intense, the high touch points are really key to turn somebody's life around. And of course, not having that adverse situation where there is a shooting is certainly something that we save a life and certainly provide a safety environment. So to the extent that we can do that, I think this is something that I hope we were able to support as a community. That'll be all, Mayor Seller. Thank you. Thank you, Khalid.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Vega. as a wrap up for myself, I would just like to say this is a wonderful program, and I'm so impressed with it. I read the full report of the UC Berkeley professor and the numbers, and it's just a smart program. It's very well thought out, and I think we as a council have been struggling to find something that makes sense. And this to me makes sense. I also want to thank our voters again. When they adopted Measure J and renewed it with Measure R, they provided the source of funds that, as I understand, we're using to cover the cost of this program. $200,000 a year is serious money for our city. But I like the use of the term investment. You're going to pay one way or another, as you made clear in your testimony, Khalid. If we know what the consequences of doing nothing are. We're doing some things, but we're still not doing enough. So this is another way of addressing it. And I appreciate what Deputy Chief Cucci had to say. Y-Grip is actually a lot for younger kids to some extent. So I suspect there's some age demographics and other things that distinguish these programs. And certain things are going to work for some people, not for others. So I think the problem is acute enough and important enough. Maintaining these different approaches, if we're able to support them, is wise. Those are my comments, but I would like to invite the public to weigh in. City Clerk, has anyone written in or called in on this issue?
Mayor Stallard, I do have 6 email messages to read to you.
Lucky us. Read on.
Thank you. This one was forwarded from Mayor Pro Tem Vega. So it starts, Dear Maida, I wanted to introduce myself and work our group does in Yolo County. I am the co-lead for Yolo County Moms Demand Action for Gun Safety. We will be supporting the proposal to have Advanced Peace work here in Woodland as a community organization who work with youth to reduce gun violence. I believe this item will be on the April 6th council meeting. We are very familiar with Advanced Peace, who have been working in Sacramento and have shown great results, specifically in the years before COVID, in reducing youth homicides. California Moms Demand Action's main focus this year is to support funding $114 million for the California Violence Intervention and Prevention, CalVIP, grant that funds community groups working to prevent violence. Thank you for your service to the City of Woodland. I look forward to meeting you in the future. Sincerely, Rosemary Yoshikawa.
Thank you. Our second one?
So the second one is from Rosemary Yoshikawa. Okay, so there's actually only 5. Dear Woodland City Council, my name is Amy Hogue, and I am a volunteer with Moms Demand Action in Yolo County as the Be Smart lead. Be Smart is a public awareness campaign to advocate for secure firearms storage to save lives. I am writing to fully support Woodland's proposal for Advanced Peace to join RISE to reduce gun violence in Woodland. Advanced Peace is dedicated to ending cyclical and retaliatory gun violence in our neighborhoods. They have been successful in cities like Sacramento, where they had 2 years with 0 youth homicides before the pandemic. Our California Moms Demand Action state chapter has advocated, along with a coalition of community organizations, for the state grant CalVIP that funds community organizations like Advanced Peace. We have partnered closely with Advanced Peace, who are working in the communities and on the ground and have proven results in lowering gun violence. Additionally, we are familiar with Advanced Peace Sacramento and the good work they have been doing. Gun violence has dramatically increased since the start of the pandemic, with no end in sight. The work of organizations like Advanced Peace is needed more now than ever. As a volunteer with Yolo County Moms Demand Action, I look forward to continuing our work to make Yolo County a safer community.
Thank you. Next one.
My name is Gil Williams, and I am a volunteer with Moms Demand Action in Yolo County as the Be Smart training lead. Be Smart is a public awareness campaign to advocate for secure firearm storage to save lives. I am writing to fully support Woodland's proposal for Advanced Peace to join RISE to reduce gun violence in Woodland. Advanced Peace is dedicated to ending cyclical and retaliatory gun violence in our neighborhoods. They have been successful in cities like Sacramento, where they had 2 years with 0 youth homicides before the pandemic. Our California Moms Demand Action state chapter has advocated, along with a coalition of community organizations, for the state grant CalVIP that funds community organizations like Advance Peace. We have partnered closely with Advance Peace, who are working in the communities and on the ground and have proven results in lowering gun violence. Additionally, we are familiar with Advance Peace Sacramento and the good work they have been doing. Gun violence has dramatically increased since the start of the pandemic, with no end in sight. The work of organizations like Advance Peace is needed more now than ever. As a volunteer with Yolo County Moms Demand Action, I look forward to continuing our work to make Yolo County a safer community. Yours, Gil Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. And we have one or two more.
Two more. Dear Woodland City Council, I am writing in full support of the current proposal for Advance Peace to work with RISE to reduce gun violence in Woodland. I am familiar with the Advance Peace through my work as a volunteer with Yolo County Moms Demand Action. It is a violence intervention and prevention program that targets individuals at the core of gun hostilities and places them in high-touch, personalized partnerships with trained fellows. It has had proven success reducing youth homicides in California cities, including Sacramento. Incidents of gun violence have increased dramatically in the last year. It is essential that we bring Advance Peace to Woodland. Thank you for your consideration. Terry Greenfield, Yolo County Moms Demand Action.
Thank you, Ms. Greenfield.
Dear City Council, I am writing to fully support Woodland's resolution to fund Advance Peace's efforts to reduce gun violence in Woodland. Advance Peace has been successful in cities like Sacramento, where they had 2 years with 0 youth homicides before the pandemic. Their work gets results, and I am confident they will be successful in Woodland. As a volunteer with Yolo County Moms Demand Action, I have heard time and again about the success that violence interruption groups have had in communities across California. I have advocated alongside members of our California chapter and with a coalition of community organizations for increased funding for the California Violence Intervention and Prevention State Grant, CalVIP, that funds community organizations like Advance Peace. We have partnered closely with Advance Peace, who are working in the communities and on the ground with proven results in lowering gun violence. Specifically, we are familiar with Advance Peace Sacramento and the good work they have been doing. Gun violence has dramatically increased during COVID, making this work even more essential. Taking this important step of funding an effective violence interruption program here in Woodland is the right thing to do. Thank you for your time and consideration. Karen Sanotto.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. That concludes the public comment, I believe. I appreciate everybody writing. One of the unfortunate things of doing things electronically is we tend to hear the same thing repeated, but we're very appreciative that people care enough to reach out to us. Was there anything more from our council before we call for a motion on this?
Mayor?
Yes, Mr. Lance.
Sorry, I have one more question.
Okay, please.
And it's this, Khalid, I'm going to vote for this because I believe that you're a good program and I want you to succeed in the city of Woodland. However, we have naysayers who live in our community and are going to ask us individually, I'm sure each council member will be asked, you know, why are we paying criminals? What is the best answer for that?
Yeah, so I would appreciate the question. Yeah, I think that there's always naysayers in every city that we've entered, and I don't know that there's always a convincing. Some naysayers will not be convinced, but I would say that, you know, what we're doing is we're investing in the future of community members in our community, and we're also investing in neighborhoods that have historically been exposed to a lot of crime and poverty and other things, other challenges. So, you know, I would say it's more of an investment. They're definitely, you know, every individual, you know, it is giving them an opportunity. We believe that we see the humanity in these individuals. We see their potential. We see them as assets to their community. We see beyond the worst thing that they've ever done. We see their talents, and we see beyond the tattoos and all that kind of stuff. And at the end of the day, and it's an investment in their humanity. Many folks in our community now Many people wanted to write them off. You know, they wanted to write them off. There's a lot of individuals, I'm sure maybe even in some of our city departments, who have stories to tell, who can tell you about some of the challenges that they had to overcome. And it probably was one bad decision away from being that individual that they're so-called labeled as a criminal that is no longer worthy of community support. And I'll tell you right now, you're looking at one of them right here, you know, who is a former high school dropout, you know, a former raised by a single mother, and was on welfare and all those other things and exposed to a lot of street activity. And I was actually very attracted to the street life. But, you know, fortunately for me, I was able to use sports and other things to go get my college degree. But I would say that there's a lot of community members who was just you know, walking that line. And we believe that these individuals will demonstrate their potential as upstanding community members. So, I mean, that's one thing. The other side of that, council member, is even if a person is not convinced that this program is effective, I think some people may agree that taxpayers' investments is worth something that we should take a look at. And so we believe that, once again, if you just look at the dollars and cents of it, take away the program side, just, you know, what is good investments? Everyone agrees that these individuals that we're gonna be working with are the most likely individuals to either be shot or killed and or imprisoned over the next 6 to 12 months. And so this comes from a validation of community members, it comes from a validation of law enforcement. So we agree on that. The average cost to incarcerate a juvenile who's committed a violent crime is about $228,000 a year, a juvenile, right? So, so we know that this 16 or 17-year-old is on this path. You know, it just seems like it makes economic sense, even if you may not agree on the principles and the evidence of the program, that taxpayers' money could be better spent in preventing a violent crime. And this is not even to discuss, and I don't want to belabor this topic. You can probably tell I'm pretty passionate about it, but it's not to even discuss the trauma that comes out of every homicide to a community. So once one homicide, it's not just the victim, right? It's not just the victim that's impacted. It's the neighbors of where that homicide happens, or that gunshot goes off, or someone's hit. It's the, you know, that's somebody's son, that's somebody's cousin, that's somebody's brother or sister, somebody's nephew. And a lot of times when I talk about the dollars and cents, it doesn't even calculate the mental health side of that trauma that often impacts individuals for the rest of their life. The mothers, the parents, the cousins, the neighbors. You know, everyone has a right to have their opinion on what is a worthy investment of taxpayer dollars. We believe there's enough evidence, and we believe that these individuals and the communities who've often been neglected for decades are worthy of the investment.
Thank you very much.
Any further questions?
I actually do have one more, Mr. Mayor.
Please proceed.
Is this program exclusively for males?
No, it just so happens that, so we do have and have had some females in the program. Majority of the data, you know, tells us that it's typically our males who are victims of gun violence, both on the perpetrator side and on the victim side. But no, there's somewhat of a trend happening in some urban communities where young women are getting more active, not just in the gang lifestyle, which that's been going on for a while, you know, at least a decade, trending up, but actually becoming active shooters. So no, it is not specific to male or female. It's specific to whoever's the most dangerous individuals in that community at a given time.
Okay, thank you.
I'd just like to say, you know, I think if there's anything we can do to redeem lives, why wouldn't we do it? Not everybody may feel that's a worthy objective, but I do. And, you know, one of my biggest worries in this community is innocent victims caught in crossfire. Some of our gun violence is people shooting from one vehicle at another vehicle. And about maybe 2 years ago, one of those incidents led to a shot going through the window of a home and lodging in the wall above a crib. And I had to listen to that grandmother go to pieces talking about this. So, you know, thank goodness we haven't had anything noteworthy yet other than these anecdotal incidents. But we have a duty, in my view, as leadership of this city to address this issue. And I know we all care about it. And, you know, I'm sorry if some folks don't feel it's worth the money. I think it's worth the money. And that's where I'll be tonight. Is there any additional comment before we go to a motion? Anyone want to care to make the motion?
Hernandez.
Motion, Mayor Stoller.
All right, then we'll take Councilmember Fernandez as the mover of the item and Mayor Pro Tem Vega as the second. Is there further discussion on the motion? Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Vega?
Aye.
Councilmember Fernandez?
Aye.
Councilmember Garcia Cadena?
Aye.
Councilmember Landsberg?
10 ayes.
Mayor Stallard?
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, well, thank you everyone tonight and Khalid and for your presentation. And we look forward to monitoring progress and seeing some improved statistics for our community. Thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you all for the support, and we're looking forward to a great relationship and partnership. Thank you all for your support.
Now, you know, we've been in session now for 2 hours and 45 minutes. Madam Clerk, would you set the clock for 5 minutes? And we'll have a 5-minute recess at this time, and we'll all watch the clock and be sure to be back in our places. It's now 17 minutes after 8. So at 8:21, we'll be back in session, all right?
Thank you. Jay, can you set the timer?
I did put you on mute, by the way.
I noticed you did. Can I take myself off?
Yeah, you can.
Okay, we're cruising on down here. All right. All right, our 5 minutes is up. Let's see, I see Council Member Garcia Cadena, and I see Mayor Pro Tem Vega, and I see Council Member Landsberg, and still waiting on Council Member Fernandez, I think. So when Vicky's back, we'll get going. Okay, I see Council Member Fernandez has rejoined us. We will now return to session, and we are now down to the final item on the agenda, which is fiscal year spring budget workshop for the 21-22 fiscal year. And the manager reminded me that even though Council Member Landsberg and I are old veterans at budget reviews, we have 3 new members of the council for whom this is the first time. So we want to make sure everybody gets thoroughly briefed and has their questions answered. So with that, I'll turn it over to the manager and let him introduce the item.
Great, thank you, Mayor. So every year the council starts their budget planning process for the following year with a spring budget workshop. And so as tradition has it, the budget workshop typically has 2 components to it. This year we're adding a 3rd component. But the first component is really grounding the council again every year in the budget model that we operate from. And that gets into, understanding the revenue assumptions as well as the expenditure assumptions and how those various expenditures and revenues interact with each other and the sensitivities that our budget has relative to performance of those. And so it's important for us to, again, remind the council and the community how the budget is built and what the key assumptions are that goes into that budget, so that as we move forward into the budget decision-making process and ultimately presenting a final budget to the council, we have a firm understanding of all the moving parts that go into that. Secondly, there's a component that focuses on financial planning for fiscal stability, and that's really grounded in a solid framework with balancing measures that have been important in prior years, and especially as we move forward with very uncertain times, but opportunities for us to either dial back expenditures should revenues not materialize, or given forecasts, potentially being an opportunity like we are this year to take some strategic investments towards priority needs. And typically those are one-time needs that are unfunded, but we have a unique opportunity given where we're at with the budget to potentially invest in one-time expenditures that allow us to be more fiscally protected and solvent in the out years moving forward. In addition, this year we will be having an initial conversation with the council around the American Rescue Plan dollars that were recently approved by the federal government, and we anticipate to receive nearly $13 million over the course of 2 years from the federal government to help us address expenditures and response to community as well as city organizational impacts as a result of COVID. And so we'll start tonight's conversation with the council about what we now know about the parameters of those funds, and kind of outline a process moving forward for us to come back to the council ultimately, probably in the context of the budget this year, to have council make some initial recommendations on how to invest those dollars. So with that, I will turn it over to Kim McKinney, our Administrative Services Director. First time I get to introduce you to Kim as Administrative Services Director. So congratulations to Kim for her hard work. But her and her budget team have put together a good document and a lot of slides. So be patient and pay attention as we move through a lot of data, a lot of information here. But we will provide all of these slides to each of the council members after the meeting. So if you need to and want to, you can dig into those in more detail and follow up with questions as needed. And we will post this to the agenda as well for the public to view. So with that, Kim, I'll hand it over to you to walk through the presentation.
Welcome, Kim, and congratulations on your promotion.
Thank you very much. Thank you. The city manager covered a good introduction of what we're going to go over here, and I'm going to start with a calendar, and usually we get this at the end and we'll revisit a little later, but the budget process every year is a very lengthy process, very staff intensive. It starts generally in the December timeframe where the departments provide updated revenue projections. They look at their expenditures. They submit requests for funding that they would like to have considered the next year. While we're planning for the budget for next year, we also have to keep tracking how we're doing in the current year. So we came to council in the middle of, February 20th to give you a mid-year update that talked about how we are looking for the remainder of this year. Tonight is the spring budget workshop. We expect to be back the second meeting in May to go into a little bit more detail into the measures E, F, and J spending plans and also the capital budget at that time, since tonight we're pretty much just focused on the operating and maintenance budget. And we'll bring to you what we are expecting to be our budget recommendations, our funding recommendations to include in the budget. And then we come back potentially twice, maybe once in June for the proposed budget and final adoption, which is generally done and is required to be done before July 1st of next year. The framework that we go through each and every time we do a budget is that our primary goal is to adopt a budget that supports our ongoing and recurring expenditures with revenues that are also ongoing and recurring. We do look to allocate limited use of one-time resources to accomplish some of our funding needs, and also have a lot of focus on maintaining prudent reserves in the general fund, which we have a policy that's adopted to maintain a 20% reserve policy in the general fund. these reserves, and we'll revisit this again a little bit later, are primarily there to have a cushion against our revenue projections, because they are just that, they're projections, they're going to fluctuate, they won't be 100% accurate. It also helps us in balancing our budget over time, that we may rely on our reserves in the short term to get through some difficult situations like we are expecting to do this year. We use it to, or can use it to, leverage and match outside funding, and then also, again, to target one-time expenditures. And the city manager covered this, so I'll just briefly, what we're going through tonight is the assumptions that lead into the development of the budget about our revenues, our expenditures. We primarily focus on the general fund, but we do have over 100 funds in the city, and each of them has their own budget, but many of those are restricted in nature, and we don't have a lot of control over how that's allocated, whereas the general fund is the primary discretionary fund for the city. We'll go over a 5-year forecast for the general fund, and then some discussion about unfunded needs and requests. Very briefly touch on our sales tax measures and the American Rescue Plan, get a little bit of council feedback, and be ready to come back a little later. So getting into the baseline for the general fund, this chart here shows the first column is where we're expecting to end the current fiscal year. This column right here is what we came in the month of February to talk about our mid-year budget. We're expecting to have $56 million of revenue in the general fund. What we do in our forecast, and what the year we're focused on right now, this baseline year, is we take what we know for all of our revenue categories and project them over the 5-year period. So this is sort of the categories of the major general fund revenues, our biggest revenue source being sales tax, and that number includes our general, what we call Bradley Burn sales tax, and also includes Measure J. Measure F is segregated on its own down here, so it's not mixed into that number because it doesn't stay in the general fund. We collect it there and then move it out, so we're trying not to commingle that here. Our next largest property tax revenues, we'll get into a little bit more detail than that later. Motor vehicle in lieu. These license fees are related to primarily to development activity in the city. This is a miscellaneous mixture of rental fees, investment income, et cetera. These service charges are the revenues we collect from our primarily our recreation programs. We have some small grants and fines, and this totals this $51.7 million of revenue for the general fund. When you add in Measure F, we get up to $58 million. Over the 5 years, what this little summary down here shows that our revenues, they do grow every year, not substantially, and that's based on a number of factors in our forecast. But at the end of the 5-year period, you could see that we're expecting to add what averages to about $1.5 million each year, but totals about $7.5 million over the 5-year period in revenues to the general fund. So once again, this is back to the property taxes we talked about. Property taxes generally are pretty slow reaction to economic downturns, and are also pretty slow to come back. So in 2008, we had a high year of property tax revenues prior to the downturn in the economy. And it took us all the way back to fiscal year 16 to recover the revenues to where they were at the start of the last recession. There's a couple of components that go into that projection, into the forecast for property taxes. There's a statewide assessment for an inflation factor, which is generally around 2% a year. This year, the state indicated that that's actually just about 1% that we're going to be allocating next year. And so obviously that impacts the growth that we would be expecting in property taxes. There's also new development that's occurring in the city that gets factored in there, as well as turnover of housing stock within the city. So we are averaging about a 3% growth in property taxes, fairly conservative, and we continue to reassess this over time, but we're about a 3% a year growth in property taxes throughout the forecast. Sales taxes, this is our Bradley Burns, which is 1% of gross sales that we collect here. We use a consultant that helps us do a very detailed analysis of all the taxpayers in the city and what their revenues look like and what they're forecasting based on the types of businesses that they are. At this time last year, when we were doing the budget, we're like everyone else, not exactly sure what the impact to the economy was going to be from the COVID situation. But all indications at the time were that we were going to be heavily impacted in the area of sales taxes, and therefore we scaled back our projections pretty dramatically. As it turns out, it was not nearly as bad as we were worried that it was going to be. And you can see in what the green column, that's the current year budget, that there was obviously an impact to our revenues and they went down from the year before, but I'm sorry, fiscal year 20 is what we just finished, and it did have a drop off from the year before. This is the year we're in right now based on our budget, our updated mid-year budget, and then where we're forecasting moving forward, a fairly large growth into the next year, and then averages about a 3.5% to 4% a year after that. Our sales tax base is fairly diverse. We don't have a significant amount in one category compared to others, and that's been very beneficial to us during the COVID impact. There are a number of agencies that were significantly more negatively impacted than we were. And we also benefit from increased online purchases since a couple of years ago, there was a new law passed that online retailers had to collect and remit sales tax, which they weren't always doing. And we are collecting all of that now, and there was a significant amount of online sales, so we have benefited from that as well. One other area included in our forecast, our transient occupancy tax, which is a tax that's collected by hotels and remitted to the city. And then we share that revenue with the county. 20% of it we pass through to the county. This was our most impacted revenue source related to the COVID pandemic. And you can see in fiscal year 20, there was a drop off from the previous year, but a substantial drop off between fiscal 20 and this is the year we're in right now. This green column is fiscal year 21, a significant drop off in expected revenues. In our forecast for next year, we're expecting the first quarter of the year to still be and continue to be impacted and lower than normal for revenue projections, and then a return to a more normal level in the years after that. So fairly conservative, but we still think, we still have some level of unknown impact to these businesses and the revenues that they generate. So not as good news there. That's the major areas of our revenue. So getting into the expenditure forecast, again, primarily in the general fund. As is the case with most government agencies, the majority of our expenditures are for staff. We provide services, and therefore we have a lot of staff and people that we need to pay for. So about 67%, this number is little right here, 67% of the general fund budget expenditures are for staff-related costs. This blue area broken down here is the different categories included in our personnel costs. Most of that is in the area of salaries that are paid to employees. Retirement here is the city's contribution to CalPERS, which we'll cover in a little more detail in a minute, is 21% of staff costs. Healthcare here, this are premiums that we pay for medical insurance on behalf of employees. OPEB means other post-employment benefits, and primarily here at the city that is medical premiums paid for retirees. We don't offer that benefit for new employees, and we stopped offering that in 2006, but we still have a number of employees who were already retired that continue to receive that benefit, and some that are still eligible to receive it when they retire. And that makes up 6% of the staff costs. And then there's some miscellaneous other in here. So you can see, again, almost 70% of general fund costs are related to staff. The next largest category is in contract services, which is 13%. And that includes, and we'll cover that a little bit later, our larger contracts in there are for animal services, YICA for dispatch services, and city attorney janitorial, but a lot of fairly small costs in there as well. And we just wanted to point out here as a reminder that staffing costs, over which we have some level of control, are a major component. And when we do have to look at making reductions in expenditures in the general fund, we have very few places to look that don't impact staffing. And luckily, we aren't in the situation this year where we're looking to make significant reductions like we were last year. There's a lot of numbers on this chart, I know. What this is covering is a couple of those categories in personnel costs and how we're factoring them into the forecast. So the very first column here, again, is salary growth over the years. And this number right here is the annual additional cost to the general fund each year. And so in the area of salary growth between the current year's projection and next year's budget is a pretty significant growth. And that's primarily because this year's number is lower because staff agreed to concessions. And we also had a number of vacancies that we were holding vacant. So it made the current year number kind of extra low. So it looks like a big growth next year, in part because of that. And then we generally average about 3 to 4% a year growth. There's an extra large jump here, but there's a note at the bottom that we hired a couple of 3 firefighter positions that are funded by a grant. And once the grant expires, we absorb them fully into the general fund. And so that shows a kind of larger jump in the general fund here. This middle section, retirement, is our CalPERS. Once again, CalPERS gives us rates that are a % of salary that we send money to them based on. And there's 2 different plans. Safety is for our sworn police and fire employees, and then miscellaneous is everybody else. And so we get some rate projections from CalPERS, and we forecast those in our general fund expenditures, well, citywide expenditures every year. And we can see that the general fund impact, again, each year, this is the growth. And then over the 5-year period, we're adding $2.6 million in retirement costs in the general fund. Once again, this OPEB, other post-employment benefits category, is for retiree medical premiums. And this is just the premiums that the city pays on behalf of people who are already retired. This isn't setting aside money for future retirees, what we call pre-funding, which we'll cover in a few minutes. And again, that's adding $500,000 over 5 years to the general fund. And then again, the premiums that are paid on behalf of employees. If we have already MOUs negotiated with employees and we know the changes, we include those in the budget. Otherwise, we have some conservative factors built in there. So what all those numbers add up to and show down here at the bottom is that each year for just these categories in personnel costs, we're adding what averages to be about $1.7 million a year to the general fund in expenditures. And over the 5-year period, that totals $9.7 million. And if you'll remember at the beginning when we talked about revenues, over the same 5-year period, we were adding about $7.5 million of revenues. We're adding $9.7 million in expenditures, just personnel expenditures here. And so you can see that this kind of highlights an imbalance that we have where our expenditures grow faster than our revenues do and contribute to an ongoing forecasted structural problem in the general fund. We've talked about CalPERS a lot over the years, and it's been pretty high visibility among government agencies just because of large changes that have occurred there and the impact on government agencies. You can see there was a period of time where CalPERS told everyone, we're fully funded. You don't need to send any money to us because we have enough. In response to that, many agencies increased their benefit levels and negotiated what we call enhanced benefits with some of their employees, which turned out to cost more than was expected, and that resulted in growth in some of the rates. In 2008 here, CalPERS lost a lot of money in the investment market, and the only way they get that money back is by increasing the rates to agencies, which has led to this climbing line here. And then again, right around this time, CalPERS changed the assumptions that they use, what they call the discount rate, which is what they expect to earn on investments over time. It used to be 7.75%, and they ratcheted that back to 7%. They phased that in over time, but that had a significant impact on the cost of retirement contributions from the city, and that continues to grow in here. So we'll talk a lot about PERS because it is a lot of money. And we'll point out down here that in 2018, the city made what we call an extra payment to PERS, which was a payment directly towards our unfunded liability, which it was just about $4 million that we sent to PERS to pay down our rates. And it had an immediate and beneficial impact. It saved about $600,000 a year in our contribution to PERS. So it was a good investment, but we continue to forecast challenges funding that over time. And this shows each year just a total of what we contribute to CalPERS. And at the top is the general fund contribution, and then all the other funds. So in next year's budget, there's almost $7.4 million in retirement related costs in the general fund, which is almost $11.3 million citywide, and that you can see it will grow over time. And it's just a different reflection of the chart we were looking at where the costs continue to grow. And we have very little control over that because there's so many factors that go into those rates that we don't impact them. It's based on, a lot of it's based on returns in the investment market, as well as just assumptions and how they turn out related to CalPERS. And when CalPERS gives us our forecasts, they include what's called the funded status, which means what percent are you funded? If you had set aside all the money you need to pay for your benefits, for your retirement benefits in the future, what percent are you funded? And so right now, we're about, between the two plans, 66 in our safety plan, 62 in our miscellaneous plan. You can see, dropped off significantly, and that was when CalPERS lost a significant amount of money in investments during the Great Recession. What the goal is to be about 90% funded to be considered a well-funded retirement plan. If you fall below 60% or getting closer to 50%, there's some liquidity concerns, which means CalPERS worries about having enough cash to pay current retirement benefits, and they have to basically sell some of their investments to be able to pay retirement. So the goal is to get that number to 90%, but it's going to take a while to get there. And every year that changes a little bit related to the factors that are included in our forecast. So we continue to make all of the payments that are required. We just haven't made dramatic process. And this is not uncommon among all CalPERS participants. It's not, Woodland is not unique in this situation. Almost all participants in CalPERS took significant hits in their funded status over the last several years and will take time to recover as well. Other post-employment benefits, again, this is retiree medical for the most part. We are required every 2 years to do an analysis of and look at what is our unfunded liability, which means how much should we have set aside to pay for retirement premiums, for medical premiums for our retirees, anybody who's qualified for it. And our last update showed that it was just about $43 million was our unfunded liability. We did set up a trust fund in 2014 and have made contributions over time, which we call pre-funding, which allows us to impact this unfunded liability number by offsetting it with investment growth. And we've earned about 7 to 8% since the inception of our trust fund, which is actually quite well for that fund. What we should be setting aside, this number right here, $4.5 million, is called the annual required contribution. And that's the amount of money we should be setting aside in the budget every year if we wanted to fund this $43 million number. And if you translate that into a percent of our salaries, we should be setting aside about 16.5% of salaries to this trust fund that we have. What we're actually paying each year, so in our budget, the current year is $3.3 million, or just under 11%. So we hover around 11% of the contribution versus the 16%. So we're paying for the actual premiums for our currently retired employees, And we are also setting aside just over $1 million a year to put into our trust fund towards future retirement costs, which we call pre-funding. Our hope is to grow that over time, but we've leveled out at this percent, this $1 million over the last several years, but continue to make some progress towards our unfunded liability. So we just talked about a lot of staff-related costs because, again, the majority of the costs in the general fund are from staff. We do have other costs in the general fund not related to staffing, the largest one being our supplies and services. And at the bottom there, we list a couple of the larger contracts that we have in the city that are included in this $8.5 million number for supplies and services. So our park maintenance contract is included in there, and that's for maintenance of just general fund parks. There are other parks in the city that also have maintenance associated with them, but are not included in this number here. Our contract for our city attorney, for janitorial services at city facilities. And then the largest two at the bottom here are animal services contract. It's $825,000 next year in the budget. And just under $2.3 million for our dispatch services with YICA. We inflate these around 2% a year. Animal services and YICA generally are closer to 5% a year that we grow those numbers, and those are factored into our forecast. And then these other categories, I won't go into a lot of detail with them, but there are other costs in the general fund related to equipment, to PG&E costs for water, and we inflate those at a range 3 to 5% a year for the most part, and again are factored into the general fund forecast. We talk a lot about the general fund, like I mentioned before, but we do have other funds in the city. We have over 100 funds. We do try to point out on a regular basis the ones that are struggling and generally have some problems in the budget area. So the city owns and operates a cemetery that has its own fund, but it does not break even each year. And this is despite a $200,000 a year contribution already from the general fund. It still has another $230,000 a year that it falls short. And so we don't have a good solution for that yet, but we continue to watch that and monitor the budget. Our storm drain or storm water fund, we've talked about this a number of times. Our rates have been unchanged in there since the 90s. We collect 48 cents a month for residential accounts. The general fund subsidizes already this fund about $250,000 a year, and it continues to operate at a deficit of almost $400,000 a year. And we expect that to get worse as the state continues to enforce additional regulations or pass down additional regulations on agencies. Transportation funds, we get gas tax funds and also Transportation Development Act funds. The priority for TDA funds is for transit services. So the Yolo County Transportation District gets kind of first dibs on that money. And as that revenue doesn't grow substantially every year, but YCTD's budget does grow, so the city gets a little bit less every year, and we use that to fund our road crews and the signs and marking crews, and so we generally forecast a $200,000 to $500,000 a year shortfall in those funds, which right now Measure F and prior to that Measure E, we're providing a subsidy to those programs. And then in our capital area, we have a general capital fund that we call, and that's really when we have matching funds that are needed for development related projects. The only revenue source that has is contributions from the general fund. So that doesn't get a lot better unless we specifically allocate money there. And then in our citywide development impact fees, and we've talked about this a number of times, these are long-standing, large deficits that have accumulated over time for a number of reasons, including projects that were built in advance of having collected the revenues, and also when the city issued debt to pay for those, where we had ongoing debt service requirements, but we're not collecting enough money to make those debt service payments and break even there. So we actually have made progress over time. These numbers used to be a lot bigger, but they are, they're still pretty large. $13.8 million in sewer, $9.8 million in parks. And this is a loan basically that's due to Measure E because it borrowed money to pay debt service. And then the police and storm drain funds are, slowly improving here. And we did have on this list before, I want to say the road development fund and the fire development fund, but those have improved enough and are actually have positive fund balances now. So that's some level of good news there, but we continue to keep an eye on these funds and we'll bring them to your attention periodically. So in summary, getting to the general fund forecast, all of those revenue assumptions and expenditure assumptions get consolidated in.
Kimberly,
Yes.
this is the mayor. I want to interrupt you just briefly to ask for a motion to extend the meeting for 15 minutes to 9:15, please. Can I have a motion?
To extend the meeting to 9:15.
Is there a second? All right. For discussion, there being none, Madam Clerk, call the roll, please.
Mayor Pro Tem Vega.
Aye.
Councilmember Fernandez.
Aye.
Councilmember Garcia Cadena.
Aye.
Councilmember Landsberg.
Aye.
Mayor Stallard.
Aye. So the meeting will be extended till 9:15. Please proceed, Kimberly.
This chart here shows the general fund 5-year forecast, and again, consolidating everything we went over before with the revenues and expenditures here. So the green column here, this was fiscal year 20, the year that we finished up in June of 20. These blue columns, this was what the budget at when we adopted it last year in June, and then in February we came back to provide an update. And we'll say that fiscal year 20 turned out much better than we expected it to at this time last year when we were looking at what we think our budget's going to look like. And the budget that we adopted in June also was a different picture than what we actually see happening and are expecting to happen for the remainder of the fiscal year. And I'll just point out that one of the numbers we look to is the beginning balances means the reserve balance here. And so when we ended fiscal year 20, we actually ended up with $17.3 million in general fund reserves. We're projecting our revenues to be more than our expenditures by about $270,000. We have some one-time use of reserves. So we're expecting to end this fiscal year with a little over $17 million in reserves, which is 33% of general fund revenues. And that's a very good number compared to the 20% target that we have. In looking forward to next year's budget, this is the kind of beige column here that we're focusing on. All of the revenue information we talked about before, we're expecting this $58 million here. The expenditures is very close to the number. We're very close to being balanced. We're just about $100,000 more in expenditures and revenue. And this will continue to change over the next couple of months. So I wouldn't get too focused on that number, but the good news is we're fairly close to being balanced, and it's close enough that we don't feel like we need to look for any reductions. We can use the reserves that we have built up to get through this year and get a little more information and see how things go. So we're viewing that as a really positive development for this budget. As at this time last year, when we looked at the budget, this forecast looked like we were going to have about a $2.5 million shortfall. So from $2.5 million down to $100,000 is a significant improvement. Mm-hmm. We do still show a forecasted deficit built in the 5-year forecast. And this baseline, we call it the baseline carried forwards, which is basically the current level of staffing that we have, the current revenues that we have, and we just carry those forward based on the factors that I covered earlier. And so what we show is, we do have a growing imbalance that if we do nothing, if all of our assumptions turn out to be correct and we don't do anything, we do have a growing use of reserves over time. And we can see this line down here is the general fund reserves. And we're expecting to, at the end of next year, still have a 33% reserve if we don't allocate any one-time money, which I'm going to get to that in a few minutes. But you can see over time, we still stay above the 20% for a couple of years if we do nothing and if this turns out, which normally we would come back with some balancing measures. But just to, as a reminder that even though this year's looking pretty good, we do have some work to do still in the general fund. There are, we covered a couple of what our major categories of revenues are. And again, because these are budgets, they're just based on information that we have at a point in time. The only thing we know is that they aren't going to be exactly right. And so what we look at is what if our revenues fell short by 1%? And 1% doesn't sound like a lot, but if we looked at 1% in just these three of kind of our major revenue categories, that's getting close to a half. What that would do is increase our deficit from the $100,000 we had forecasted to almost $500,000. So about a $400,000 increase in the deficit for just a 1% reduction in revenues. And because these revenues sort of become a base over time and we grow off of those, that 1% compounds over the 5-year forecast and adds to our problem. So we kind of just, we keep this in the back of our mind and monitor the major revenue sources that we have, but they can have a significant impact over time. And another area, which I've talked about a lot tonight, CalPERS, is, we don't have really any control over how that turns out. But at this time last year, we were talking about this as well because of the investment market and the turmoil, that when CalPERS loses just or falls short of their target of 7% return on investment by just 1%, there's an impact to our rates. And there's a 2-year delay before it impacts our rates because of just the way CalPERS works with doing their reports. And there's a 2-year delay and then they phase it in over 5 years. So a 1% shortfall in their target investments ends up costing the city about $250,000 per year once it's fully phased in, and about $175,000 of that would be in the general fund. So again, these are items that we keep on our radar and that we don't have a lot of control over, but that can have a significant impact on the forecast moving forward. So I'm going to highlight just one more time the general fund reserve policy that we adopted in 2018, actually revised. It used to be that we had a 12% target in the general fund, which we upped to 20%. And that really is the more generally accepted level for reserves, because that usually is about 6 months of operating costs that you would have on hand in the event that something happens. And that's exactly why you have reserves, is because there can be economic uncertainty for unforeseeable things, emergencies that happen, and that's just sort of cushion that you have. And included in that policy are approved uses of excess reserves, so money that we have beyond the 20%, which I highlighted in the forecast a little bit ago, that we should be giving priority to unfunded liabilities that we have. And we have significant unfunded liabilities in CalPERS and in our retiree medical areas. We should prioritize use of the excess reserves to help funds that have large deficits that aren't able to clear those up in other ways. Sometimes we can allocate reserves to capital projects that have a matching requirement, and then other kind of one-time needs within the budget. And what we try to avoid doing with the reserve is to rely on it over a long-term period of time to balance our ongoing operations. It's definitely a tool we have in our toolbox to address short-term balancing and to buy ourselves a little bit of time to come up with plans, but it shouldn't be something that we rely on year after year, which we haven't done. We've done quite well in the reserve area. So we should all feel pretty good about that. Part of the budget process is for the departments to submit funding requests, and that can vary from additional staffing, to purchase of equipment or supplies or other kind of priority needs that they've identified in their various work areas. So this year we received requests for $8.7 million of funding on a citywide basis. Included in the general fund, we had just under $1.3 million of requests for that would be ongoing each year, and $1.6 million additionally in what are one-time funding requests. So anything that we include in the budget as a recommended add obviously would increase the forecasted deficit that we talked about a couple slides ago in the general fund, and would accelerate the use of the reserves that we have set aside. We do have some flexibility in those reserves, and we do prioritize one-time money, and so we do have some flexibility in that area, and expect to come back to you with some funding recommendations for use of one-time money. In the enterprise funds, which is primarily our water, sewer, and storm drain funds that are funded by user fees, we had requests for about $400,000 of ongoing time and almost $700,000 of one time. We very carefully compare requests to what we have as adopted in our utility rate studies to ensure that we're maintaining compliance with those. There are some funds that have challenges, particularly in the stormwater area that I covered a little while ago, and are already relying on the general fund. And many of them have significant capital needs that can compete with one-time requests as well. In this other fund category is primarily grant funds and lighting and landscape districts, and many of those already are kind of maxed out, and we have limited flexibility in allocating additional resources there. So additional funding, if we were to allocate it, may rely on assistance from the general fund as well. And then finally, in the capital projects category, we don't have a lot of discretionary funding for capital projects. It's primarily limited to Measure F, a little bit in Measure J, and those all compete with operational needs. And then we do have some development funds that have ability to pay for projects, but many of those still are struggling with large deficits that we went over a little bit ago. We have talked about these priority projects a couple of times with council, and we've highlighted here that there's some that we've made some level of progress. None of these are fully funded, and we still have work to do in identifying ways to accomplish these projects. But the community, the second pool for the community, we have set aside $1.25 million so far over time, and towards the target of a $7 to $9 million project. And that's just the capital portion of the project, and we still have some work to do in identifying the additional operating costs that would be associated with that project as well. The next phase of the sports park, we've made some progress in the areas of softball and skate park, and the city has set aside $1.5 million in the last budgets towards that. Fire station relocation continues to be a priority project that the city has. We purchased land for that. We had allocated money in a previous budget that we ended up not setting aside due to some COVID concerns about how that would impact the budget. So we would likely continue to look at setting aside reserves for that project as well. And then the library master plan identified projects up to $25 million that they have identified as priority. And we have made some short-term progress in allocation of funds over time to make improvements in the existing facilities, and again, continue to evaluate those projects related to the funding that we have available to us. There's a lot of numbers on this slide, and you can look at it when we send you the slides, but this is just meant to highlight that we've been pretty successful over the years in allocating our one-time resources or reserves. We started doing it in about fiscal year 14 when we started having a little bit more flexibility than we normally did. And since that time, we've allocated about $13.5 million of general fund reserves to lots of different areas that have been, they've made significant progress or one time towards very priority needs, and we will continue to do that as well. On the far column, kind of highlighted in yellow, are the areas where we're expecting to come back to you with proposed one-time funding recommendations, including potentially another payment to CalPERS to help pay down that liability and reduce our ongoing rates. Some additional traffic calming money, some staffing assistance related to high levels of development and our community development department needing some additional staff, special events funding. We may revisit the fire station allocation that we didn't end up sending prior, and then some additional police department equipment and needs in there. So again, not going to go in detail today about what the funding requests or recommendations are, but we will be returning and likely have some recommendations in those areas. Very quickly, a reminder that we have a couple of sales tax measures that are included in our budget, in our operating budget. We will come back the second meeting and talk.
Kim, we're within 5 minutes of our required adjournment unless we extend the meeting. Are you going to wrap up fairly quickly, or you have a lot more?
No, I have probably like 3 more slides to talk about.
Let me ask the sense of the council. Do you want to extend the meeting to 9:30, or do you want to have the final 3 slides and then conclude the meeting?
Let's just get it done.
Okay, motion to extend the meeting to 9:30.
Another motion.
Okay. We have a motion by Council Member Landsberg, second by the Mayor Pro Tem. For the discussion, there being none, clerk, please call the roll.
Thank you, Mayor Vega.
Aye.
Councilmember Fernandez.
Aye.
Councilmember Garcia Cadena.
Aye.
Councilmember Landsberg.
Aye.
Mayor Stallard.
Aye. Please proceed, Kimberly.
Okay. So again, we'll be back in May to talk in detail about the measures F and J spending plans. It's just a reminder and a quick snapshot that there's a couple of important areas covered in these spending plans in debt service help in the area of parks, some capital projects for roads, and operating assistance for our transportation programs. And then there is existing staffing in there in the areas of public safety and economic development. And I will just point out that Measure F has also benefited from better than expected revenue performance in the sales taxes. So that's good news for this plan. And we do have some flexibility to talk about when we come back to go over that spending plan. Measure J, again, our quarter-cent sales tax measure. We will also come back and talk in detail about it. I know there's a lot of information on this slide as well. Fiscal year 21-22, the budget we're working on is the last full year that we will have of Measure J. There's 1 quarter that will follow over into the next year before Measure R takes over. So when we come back in May, we'll be talking still about Measure J and not yet about Measure R. But like Measure F and the general fund, Measure J also is experiencing better than expected revenues when we did the budget last time. So we do have a little bit of flexibility is there as well. A new development this year with the American Rescue Plan that was passed by Congress and signed by the president in March. The city of Woodland is eligible for about almost $13 million in funding. What we know right now is that we would be getting half of the money probably in May. This is about 60 days after the law was signed is when we're supposed to get our first allocation, and then the second allocation a year after that. So May of 21 and May of 22 are likely when we'll be getting that money. We have until the end of calendar year 2024 to spend that money. Right now it says spend, it doesn't talk about commit. There's still a lot we don't know about the money, and there's still a lot of work being done to get some further clarification and information. And so, there'll be additional information that we learn over time, and we're closely tracking that. But right now, we have until 2024 to spend that money. There's a couple of, in the language of the bill, a couple of areas that you're specifically allowed to spend the money and specifically not allowed. So it does say you can provide aid to households, small businesses, nonprofits, and industries that were impacted. You can provide premium pay for essential employees. This is a big one here that we can use the money to offset revenue reduction that resulted from COVID-19, which specifically was not allowed in the CARES money that was previously allocated earlier in the summer and that we got from the state. We were specifically not allowed to use that for revenues, so that is different this time around. And then also added in that you can make investments in water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure. Specifically, you cannot use the funds to offset any tax cut that you voluntarily implemented, and you may not use the funds as a direct payment to any pensions. So that's really all we know at this point in time. We're gathering information about what the revenue impact is. And again, that kind of direction changes over time. Right now, we have to look at what our actual revenue was in fiscal year 2019, which was the last full year before any COVID impacts, and then compare that to what we actually got to look for shortfalls related there. So far, it hasn't been expanded to what you were expecting to receive versus what you got. And so there could be some developments there. So staff is working on totaling what that is, as well as any direct costs that we don't think we would be, reimbursed through our claim to FEMA for federal assistance. So what we are going to be doing is, I think it's appropriate to set up an ad hoc council subcommittee to work with staff on identifying priority projects that we can allocate these one-time monies to and live within the parameters and the rules surrounding that money. So it is a substantial amount of money that we were not expecting earlier in the year, and so it's an opportunity to make up for significant shortfalls that we had, and also some potential capital investments moving forward. So this slide just kind of highlights the takeaways from all that I've talked about so far, which really is, it's a mixture of positive developments and a reminder, I think, of the work that we still have to do, that our sales tax is better than we thought, our forecast is better than it was at this time last year, but we still have work to do. We still have forecasted deficits. Our reserve balance, we've done really well in that area. We have some flexibility there. We have lots of priority needs to allocate those monies to, and we will be coming back to you. And then finally, as I just mentioned, the the American Rescue Plan and the $13 million that we're eligible for. We will continue to monitor the developments there and come up with a plan for spending that money. So we're looking for any feedback or questions that you might have about the baseline projections and assumptions, the overall forecast that we've presented, any questions you might have about our framework or funding priorities. And then just a reminder what we went over at the beginning, the calendar of following this meeting, we would be coming back in the second meeting of May to talk about the measures, the capital program, what our funding recommendations are, and then development of the proposed budget. So that's all the slides I have to go over, and be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Kimberly, thank you for a truly comprehensive briefing. I always learn some things, and it's a thing we go over every single year, but it's always helpful to revisit it and to think about it. And I'm grateful we're in the position we're in, and I attribute that to very careful management on your part, as well as, of course, our city manager and all the staff. So thank you very much. I'd like to give our new council members first opportunity to ask questions. Hopefully we'll wrap up and be able to adjourn by 9:30. Mayor Pro Tem Vega, do you have any questions?
Oh, there we go. Thank you, Mayor Sellard. Kim, thank you so much. I really appreciate all of the work you and your team put into putting a very concise presentation. I appreciate that, and also all the questions that I have gotten answered just leading up to this. No major questions. I think as I get the PowerPoint in my hands and I'll look through some of these very, very small print, I know some questions will come up. And you'll be hearing from me. So that's all, Mayor Sellard. Thank you.
Thank you. That's probably a good strategy too. some things are best done perhaps one-on-one, so you can get right to the things that are most pertinent to your own concerns. All right, let's just see. Council Member Fernandez, do you have any questions?
Kim, currently I don't. Thank you for all the information and the thorough job that you did on the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Council Member Fernandez, Council Member Garcia Cadena, any questions tonight?
Thank you. I'm going to echo what my colleagues said, and I took a lot of notes, but I'm looking forward to actually having these in my hand and looking them over carefully.
Thank you, Council Member Garcia Cadena. Council Member Landsberg.
No questions.
Thank you. I have no questions either. I think it was comprehensive, as I said, and it'll be interesting to see what we're able to afford in addition to the things that we've been paying for up till now. All right, I think that concludes our discussion. Is there any public comment of any kind on this, Madam Clerk?
No.
All right, if that is the case,
Yes. Before I let you guys run off here, so the only request and recommendation we do have tonight, as Kim summarized there, was consideration of an ad hoc subcommittee of the council to work with staff to develop a spending plan for the ARP dollars. We are starting conversations with our counterparts at the county and the other cities to explore if we were to aggregate some of these dollars towards collaborative investments, would we potentially multiply areas of impact? So there's going to be a lot of conversations over the course of the next several months, and it'll be, I think, helpful for us as staff to have a council subcommittee to sort of work through some of these policy questions before we come back to council.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. That means you'd need 2 people from our council to avoid a Brown Act problem.
Correct.
I'm personally willing to serve in this role. Colleagues, are any of you interested in joining me on this activity?
Mayor Stollard, I'd be interested in joining you.
All right, so the Mayor Pro Tem and the Mayor will constitute the Budget Subcommittee unless there's any objection from our other colleagues.
I make a motion that we appoint Mayor Stallard and Mayor Pro Tem Vega to our ad hoc committee.
Seconded.
All right, motion by Councilmember Fernandez, seconded by Mayor Landsberg, to appoint the subcommittee to consist of the Mayor and Mayor Pro Tem. Further discussion of the motion? There being none, I don't know if there'd be any public comment on this. Why don't we invite the clerk to call the roll, please?
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Vega.
Aye.
Councilmember Fernandez.
Aye.
Councilmember Garcia Cadena.
Aye.
Councilmember Landsberg.
Aye.
Mayor Stallard.
Aye.
Thank you.
Motion carries. All right, that concludes the action on the item, and that concludes our agenda. I do have one memorial adjournment tonight. We recently lost Frank and Shirley Gardner. Frank was 97, Shirley was 94. They passed away a week apart. Frank was the dean of the lawyers of Woodland for many, many years, and a highly regarded local lawyer. His wife, anyway, they were just wonderful people. They were the best friends, I think, to Harry and Eleanor Walker. Harry, a former mayor, passed away a long time ago. Eleanor is still surviving. But one of the things I thought was always remarkable about them is Shirley and Eleanor played bridge one afternoon a week for 50 years. And that's kind of a thing that can happen in a town like Woodland. It's kind of special to appreciate them and remember them. So we would adjourn in the memory tonight of Frank and Shirley Gardner, wonderful people in our community. If there's nothing else, we stand adjourned. Good night, everybody, and thank you.
Thank you.